Your attention, please. Kindly take a moment to locate your nearest fire exit. In the unlikely event of an evacuation, please follow the directions of the CCD staff and proceed directly outside. Please do not attempt to re-enter the building unless told that it is safe to do so. Thank you.
I'm Elizabeth Coyne, Editor-in-Chief of Fierce Network. That is what I looked like when I talked on this phone in 1989. I also listened to that music. Eugenia had the phone that I used in 2004, and I also listened to that music. This is the phone this is the phone I use now, but I still listen to that music because once an 80s girl, always an 80s girl. So first of all, I want to welcome you all to day 2 of Fyuz here in Dublin. I hope you guys have been having a great time in the city. And I want to thank all of the sponsors for this fantastic event. Before we get started with our panels, just a few housekeeping reminders. Don't forget to use the Wi-Fi code and also share any pictures, any great messages you have on our social media channels. So with that, I want to welcome to the stage our first Party Line panel, hosted by Christian. Come on out.
Okay, here we are. Good morning to everybody and good morning to my distinguished panel. I have some really good friends, people who've been around in this industry for a while, and people who particularly have been around in making Open RAN happen. We have Steve Papa, founder and CEO of Parallel Wireless. Great to have you here, Steve. We have Paco Martin. Everybody probably knows him as well. He's been on many panels in Fyuz, head of Open RAN in Vodafone Group. And last but not least, we have Randy Cox, VP of Product Management and Wind River. I hope I got the titles right. These are folks who I know since my journey into Open RAN over the last couple of years here in TIP. I've turned to these folks many times to get their views on where we are and what's happening in this industry. So the purpose of this panel over the next 15 minutes is to get the views of our colleagues. What have been the learnings from the early deployments and early activities around Open RAN? And I'll start by asking Paco, who represents the operator here in the group. So where are we? What's the maturity of Open RAN as deployed right now, the products and the technology that you see in the networks, both Vodafone and broader, as you are so engaged?
Thank you, Christian. Great to be here today. Well, the status of Open RAN, it's ready for prime time. We are seeing that in our network, in our deployments. It's commercial. It's delivering also not only from KPI perspective, product, but also from a procurement point of view. We are right now finalizing our radio tender, and we can see one of the initial goals for Open RAN, which was helping on vendor ecosystem competitiveness and all that is being achieved, and that's it's partially because of all the support and to a large extent from some of my colleagues today. Steve, I think he was instrumental at the beginning with parallel wireless to get us where we are today, and then Randy and Wind River, they are one basic piece of our blueprint today. So good KPIs, good technical, good technical situation, commercial, and then we are also seeing a lot of very promising innovations. One of them that comes to my mind, I always mention Cohere, that we are working on, and other things we cannot talk about right now, but they are being cooked. So very healthy, I would say. We just need more rollouts.
Okay, thank you, Paco. So you are saying we are approaching prime time. That's what you were saying. So turning to Steve, you've been part of the early trials, early deployments, as one of the representing the new players who came into this industry because of the promise of Open RAN. Can you elaborate a bit on your experiences? How has it been to integrate, to bring in new products into the networks?
Sure. So, I come from a number of different software backgrounds. So I've seen infrastructure software, I've seen database software, internet software. Wireless is signal processing software. And I don't think there's enough respect paid to how challenging that can be, because it's a real-time system. Okay, you have to do all of your work within each tick of the network. If you don't get your work done, it's like getting the spinning beach ball on your Apple laptop, okay? And so you have to build this software with an expectation that there's a 3GPP roadmap, and it's gonna continue to get harder and harder. Every one of those features added means you have to get more work done within the budget. The budget doesn't grow, it gets smaller, right? You do get the benefits from some incremental compute, right? And what that means is that there's something I call the big lie in this industry, which is that off-the-shelf stacks and PHYs can be put together on a server and you build a tier 1 class product. So the biggest lesson from being part of the early days to today is that you have to be committed to rebuild all of that, right? And it's a long journey, right? But it's necessary if Open RAN is gonna deliver long-term the caliber of network that operators expect. So that's been my big lesson, and we've been doing that hard work, and we're seeing the results, but it's not overnight.
Yeah, so we haven't overcome the big lie yet.
Excuse me?
We haven't overcome the big lie yet, or are we at least understanding what it takes to make it happen?
Absolutely. I think we have the understanding, and I think we're doing great. I think we've largely on the other side of that journey, rebuilding the stuff that comes off the shelf.
Yeah.
Right? In fact, in Q1, we pass a point where it's all gone, right? And it's built in a way that, we can provide the level of, quality and assurances to operators that they expect. So we kind of went into it believing some of this other stuff was true, right? Because that's what we were told. But we've had to, really change the thinking.
Okay, that's actually straightforward, clear feedback. It's good to kind of keep in mind. Thinking about integration, because Open RAN solutions and stacks is all about integrating functionality and products on a different level. And one of the key things here is the cloud orchestration. And I'm thinking of you, Randy. You've been also a pioneer of the early deployments of Open RAN. So what's your learning as representing a provider of that orchestration layer, if you like? What role have you had in making this all work, and what are the learnings of that?
Sure, thank you, Christian. As being the cloud provider, if you will, or the CAS, for those of you who don't know what Wind River does, we have a cloud solution that provides a geo-distributed Kubernetes architecture that allows us to manage the entire network, so thousands of sites, through the use of our cloud platform analytics tool, along with Conductor, which provides automation and orchestration. And as I think about where we fit, I use that phrase in terms in our role to play, we have to integrate in both the southbound as well as the northbound direction. And what we've found is that many carriers are coming to us in that role to help actually be the integrator in one sense with respect to, as we look at the baseband, if you will. And so we've had to be kind of the guy in the middle. In fact, we have a slide that shows Wind River in the middle of the stack between the base hardware, as Steve mentioned, in terms of COTS hardware, off-the-shelf hardware, and then the RAN application or any other application, and we're hosting many applications now. And so we're finding ourselves having to play that role between all three players, ourselves, the application, and the base infrastructure itself. So our finding in that is really about the partnerships. If we don't have good partnerships and the ability to be open and transparent with them and to trust each other, then this is a very difficult road. And so I would say our success in that, and what you can count on from Wind River, is that openness and that drive to make these integrations work. We feel like we're past that in one sense, where the feasibility's been proven, the technology's been proven, and now we're on to mass deployment at scale.
Yeah, thank you. That's interesting. Being the guy in the middle is not always so simple, but clearly you seem to have come past the, let's say, if I call it point of no return, and now it's kind of moving forward. Actually brings me to Paco, and because in a way we talked technology, but I think it's much more now about cooperation, transparency, and approach of working. So if, as an operator, how does this multi-vendor stack of different layers, how does that change you as an operator, how you engage with your vendors, and what does it take of your own team, of your own organization? Any early learnings from that, from Vodafone?
Well, I mean, there is some level of added complexity when you, I mean, in the past you would work with just a few suppliers. As an operator now, you talk to tens of them. So you need to invest when you want to do it from the R&D, since the R&D till the deployment. You need to invest in creating a team. This is something that we as Vodafone we've done. So that is the team I have the pleasure to lead. But then you have the responsibility to share that with the rest of the industry, because not everybody can do that. So that's a fundamental piece of our motivation to do it in Open RAN, to help things flying. But thanks to you doing that, you are able to transform the level of knowledge of an operator. So for us, I think we passed, there is no way back. We now know so much about how the radio is built, how you make the decisions, how you optimize. We as a mobile operator, most of the CapEx goes to the radio. So the fact that we now know at that level, is putting us in a much better position to make the best decisions. Yeah. So you can push innovation, you can work better on the cost. I think it's been an incredible journey, and to that extent, I think we have fulfilled the expectations.
Fantastic. And you certainly have been a pioneer in this, and it's interesting you talk about the deeper knowledge as well as how to share that knowledge with others. That's really commendable. Going to Steve, one of the key promises of Open RAN was really this mixing and matching of radios. Paco particularly said, radios in themselves are the biggest investment, CapEx investment in building networks. What's your take, Steve, at this stage about the multi-vendor capabilities, or rather the efforts to integrate? I would be keen to hear that.
So the multi-vendor radio world, there's good news and bad news in it, right? So I'll say the bad news first is, it's always harder than we'd like. We'd like it to be just like an Ethernet, swap, right? You plug in the cord and it just works. But there inevitably is a lot more complexity getting these things to sync up. Having a common management plane, right, has been a continued problem. I'd say the good news is Open RAN motivated a lot of investment in silicon And while you could have 20 radio vendors, in the end, it's only 3 silicon vendors.
Yeah.
And if we can just move upstream to getting those reference implementations with the radio silicon to be a little more mature, I actually think a vision of plug and play will be viable. Now, vendors have to maintain a commitment to do it, right? Like you can always design your software to have an extra feature that requires your proprietary, stuff on both sides. But if we really want interoperability, it's within grasp, given the fact that there's only a few sources of silicon at this point.
Yeah, fantastic. That's kind of a good insight. So there's always good positives and negatives, but I like you rounding up on the positive side. So actually brings me to my final question, and that goes to Randy. So given what we've heard and discussed, what do you think is, what really can now take us forward? What are the, say, from your point of view, looking at this from, as being the man in the middle in a way, what would facilitate the uptake and the acceleration of Open RAN, if you, just from your perspective?
Sure. I think I probably have 3 kind of views here. I guess first, I want to reiterate the importance of partnerships and the openness in those partnerships. Frankly, I came from Nokia for many years, and so I know what it means to be part of that traditional kind of architecture and that traditional kind of deployment, as well as how to interact with partners. And it has to shift and if in this game. And so that is absolutely critical in having open partnerships. That's number 1. Number 2, in real estate, the saying is location, location, location. And I would say with O-RAN and moving forward, it's all about automation, 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 in terms of really making this a streamlined. Now, we're at scale, and we know that that is a critical element to this, and so that would be number 2. And number 3, I would say, is taking that automation to the next step and having AI help and assist in managing and operating the network. Things like predictive outage avoidance, where we can use our analytics tool to gather all of that data into a data lake and then be able to peruse that data and figure out and determine and to look for events or signals that would give a predictive measure of an outage, as an example, or a significant issue in the network. That's one great example. The second example, I would say, is the use of being able to debug the network once something actually happens. It's one thing to know there's a problem, and we can do that through the use of analytics, and then actually fix that through the use of Conductor in terms of automation and orchestration. But what caused that problem, we can use AI to actually go figure out through that data and be able to determine what the actual root cause was. And we've seen both of those elements to be incredibly powerful in terms of being able to move into the next direction, I would say it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Randy. And as we are out of time, I would like to thank my panelists of giving a snapshot of where we are, what the learnings are. I hope you found that useful. I certainly believe we are at the cusp of getting things moving at the scale. Thank you, Steve, Paco, and Randy.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
So much to that great panel, Christian. Next, I'd like to bring out Anita Doller, who's going to talk with her panel about how cloud and AI will accelerate Open RAN.
Good morning. So we do have a very prominent and fantastic panel now. We will focus on how cloud and how artificial intelligence can accelerate the development and implementations of Open RAN. When we prepared the panel, we decided that actually we will focus more on the mid to long-term impacts, because we thought that yesterday and probably also today already, many topics have been already discussed with regards to the current opportunities and challenges associated with Open RAN. I would like to introduce our panelists. So we have Kanis Mahdi, Director Technology at Amazon Web Services Industries. We have Jefferson Wang in the middle, Chief Strategy Officer of Cloud First Accenture Global. And we have Satish Sharma, Executive Vice President of the Network Development of Boost Mobile. I work for the Next Generation Mobile Networks Alliance, an operator-driven organization. And we do work, of course, also on topics like how to enable and how to achieve cloud-native networks, network automation, energy efficiency, the mid to long-term network architecture evolution beyond 5G, 6G. And what we said is that, of course, every new development in the mid to long term has to contribute, especially new investments, have to contribute to tangible additional customer value, but also to operational efficiencies. So we have a lot of challenges, but also a lot of opportunities in front of us. And therefore, I would like to pose the very first question to Jeff. So what type of new services, opportunities, and opportunities related to operational efficiencies are you anticipating with regards to cloud and artificial intelligence enablement in the Open RAN environment?
Yeah, I think primarily we've been initially starting with kind of two vectors, right? So initially we've been trying to integrate more cost savings with energy management into the RIC, and then we've been trying to kind of shift and see where value is with making sure quality assurance is working, primarily in the RIC. I think when you had mentioned, Anita, how do we think about kind of mid and long-term opportunities with cloud and AI? Certainly, you just heard the previous panel, right? I think those are some good ones on cost savings. If you look at kind of predictive maintenance, anytime you have something that's an instruction set that has to be processed over and over again, GPUs and AI do a nice job of that, right? So anytime we can move from kind of reactive monitoring to proactive and then predictive maintenance, that's probably a big opportunity that we're seeing. Another one from a value perspective that we're starting to look at now is just on X apps, how can we actually take cloud and AI to start to develop apps faster so that we can kind of get to test and iterate faster on the second point. And then maybe on the third point, we're starting to see kind of edge processing for Open RAN. So as we start to think about kind of what we're gonna need to keep on-prem, what we're gonna process on-prem, or what we're gonna pass back to central cloud. So I think lots of really fun opportunities in the mid and long-term realm, I think, but it's also just looking past just that quality assurance and looking past that cost play, but thinking about what we can do to add value to the story as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeff. And Kanis, what is your opinion also referring to that Open RAN is reality already? So you just mentioned it, the first learnings and long-term opportunities.
Yeah, it is really very much a reality. I've been to TIP and other forums for many years. And it has been mostly POCs, demos, experiments here and there. But sitting inside the Amazon Web Services, working with a customer like Dish Networks, I'm so happy to say that we have Open RAN running in our cloud. We have about 19 locations with the CUs, the central unit of the RAN. The DUs are distributed in our customer premise, and it's working. So it is very much the reality. The future is now, and we are now building the next steps of the future. And to answer your question, what are the new opportunities or challenges? I would say speed, scale, and security. And these are the areas that AI and data will be very helpful in unraveling the problems there.
Thank you, Kanis. And Satish, so your first learnings and also the long-term vision from your perspective.
Yeah. So think about it this way. 4 years ago, we went on the path of putting the best in-class technology out there. And today, and Kanis just mentioned, we have one of the largest deployment of ORAN in the world. And it's not just the largest deployment, it covers 250 million covered POPs in the country. And it's also the largest 5G VoNR network in the world, because we don't have any legacy, so it's the only way to go. So all that done in a speed and scale is just mind-blowing, right? Where are we heading? Now we got to get to the tune of operating this powerful network and powerful technology. And so our view now is really how do you become, how do you deliver the promise of ORAN, both in terms of the stack, the cost of running the stack, and how do you further squeeze cost out of the stack? And that's where we're going to be on the journey. And then how do you leverage all these capabilities we're going to have in terms of, we have rich source of data because of the open interface, and we're putting everything on the data lake. And we're really going through all that information. Remember, data is only good as the last time you checked it. So you need to have very strong orchestration layers that not only do orchestration, but also does data curation on the spot, right? By doing all that, we expect to be not only from a TCO perspective, but also operational efficiency, power savings, and there are multiple layers of insights we get, not only in terms of how the network performs, but what is the end customer experience that it delivers. And those things is what we're going to be focusing heavily on.
Thank you.
Anita, just one thing Kanis mentioned that's really important. I think you mentioned the word security. Yeah. And anytime we think about like a disaggregated network, immediately you start to get worried about security. And I think that's a huge opportunity for AI, because a lot of our clients are asking us basic questions on an Open RAN network on how do you deal with network segmentation, how do you deal with actually blast radius control, how do you think about the CMDB changing on these things. I'm really glad you mentioned that word, because that's things that AI can work through and actually figure out how to do virtual or physical segmentation better. How do you think about kind of the blast radius control before you commit a change? That's so right. It's a really important point.
Right. That's right.
Absolutely, thank you, Jefferson. It was also mentioned yesterday in one of the keynotes that what is priority number one for all operators today, it's not just the monetization of 5G. Of course, that's also a very important point, but it is the security, ensuring security and safety, and moving forward with this priority. So, so we said, of course, savings in operational efficiencies, how to operate those networks, but also security, speed, agility, a lot of benefits with regards to potential new services towards end users, but also operational gains. And what do you think, Kanis, is most important to enable the next steps for Open RAN with regards to technology, standardization, ecosystem development?
So Anita, what we did with Dish was monumental. We did it in a rather scrappy way. Just this morning we were talking about observability and the gaps there. I wish we had the hindsight 5 years ago when we started on the journey, and we would have started to work with the ecosystem for tech validation, crowdsource ideation, ironing out the kinks before we took the workloads to the cloud. So if you were to ask me how to prepare for the next iteration of the RAN evolution, I would suggest that the most important thing would be, of course, yes, we will go to the standards, we will go to the Open RAN Alliance to write specifications, but what's even more important is to create communities like this where we are having a multi-sector discussion as well as multi-sector experimentation, so that the cloud providers and the workloads that go on the cloud, the Anthropics of the world who are writing the models are all sitting together, ironing out the equations that will go on in the future networks. so that when you put that workload in the cloud, you flip the switch and it turns on, and it does not crap out, as it is sometimes the case with Dish and AWS experimenting things. So I would say the most important thing would be crowdsource innovation and bringing multiple sectors together in the same community.
Very good. And Jefferson, what is your opinion with regards to what is most needed?
Maybe also just building on kind of that point around as you bring different parties together on an ecosystem, really figuring out what your operating model and your talent strategy are, right? I think Dish and AWS have proven that it's working in production. We're also working with, Open RAN in these situations, and we know the tech stack is working, but the operating model is incredibly complex. So the more parties that we're getting involved, whether it's kind of third parties or other players, that operating model, those roles and responsibilities, figuring out your talent strategy is incredibly important. And a lot of times it's not necessarily kind of hiring your way into it. Now we're looking at it more as kind of talent creation, where you're gonna have to actually take like a network engineer and start to train them more on software versus kind of go the other way around and take a traditional software full stack engineer and try and teach them the network side. You can take either strategy, right, on your talent creation, but trying to like really have a deliberate way to look at that, plus putting them into an operating model, because this world is a little bit more complex. That might be one of the important things we're seeing.
Yeah. And Satish, so from your learnings, of course, it's a very impressive achievement you already conducted. And from your learnings, also with regards to operations and talent strategy, is of course also something everyone talks about in the industry. What are your priorities for the future with regards to making all the opportunities a reality with Open RAN?
To me, we got to monetize it, right? All that talk about technology, and as an operations person, I can speak about operations, but unless we get the revenues in the company and a growing customer base and a very satisfied customer base and able to demonstrate different use cases even to enterprises and B2B, until those come into play in a big way, large scale way, until then it's just a story, right? So that's our priority. It's really to monetize what we've done and further squeeze every part of it, and then use the level, the capabilities of what AI gives. I mean, these technologies are just parallel streaming together. And we're very fortunate they've come together, especially with the RIC platforms and our apps and X apps and everything else that's coming together. How do we get to the next level of those technologies and insights that can actually monetize and help monetize in a big way?
Yeah, that's of course the highest importance also for every operator and the entire ecosystem globally. How can we overcome the situation and really ensure that with the new developments we meet customer demand, we create additional value, and having the customer value and operational efficiencies and also sustainability goals, of course, in mind. Going back maybe to the point, what would you see as the next immediate steps from your company perspective, and also having a very good representation of the ecosystem here in the panel, different players of the value chain. What is your wish from your other ecosystem partners? Kanis, do you like to start?
Yeah, so dreaming the future. If I were to implement Open RAN at scale from the AWS perspective, it would be nothing more than just or I should say, very, very highly distributed, very complex modern app that is distributed across a geographical span that starts with my region and goes all the way traversing the local zones into the cell site that is basically hosted by my dear customer. So what makes it even more complex is when you think of the Open RAN constructs stretched across multiple geographical regions, but then when you're running and operating it, the intelligence that drives the schedulers and the algorithms is driven by data, and the data is being ingested at a very high volume from a network that is ever changing. So the spatial temporal distribution of workloads superimposed by the data dynamics, it turns into an extremely complex construct. And a construct that we are calling the AI continuum. So what it is basically a very, very highly distributed intelligence plane that stitches the arteries of the local zones in the regions that are running these workloads in a homogeneous fabric. So I have a control plane distributed across the entire continuum, driving not just the RAN, but also the intelligence that is driving the network, as well as the user who is consuming the network and the quality of experience for that user. So that will be my wish list. Cannot be done today, cannot be done tomorrow, but the good thing is that the next investment cycle does not happen until 6G, which is 3 years time frame. So we have quite ways to go, but I'm confident that we'll be able to get there with help from trailblazers like Dish and yourself. So very optimistic.
So beyond 5G and towards 6G with regards to probably a time horizon of 2030, I guess. And anyway, the networks are already prepared to be software-driven with the move to cloud-based services, and therefore, of course, I believe that in the industry we will see a lot of incremental innovation instead of one big revolution with regards to new services and operational efficiencies. So, Satish, from Dish or Boost Mobile perspective, what is your wish what do you plan for your own company, let's say in the next 3 years to 5 years, to establish this long-term vision? And what is your desire also from your suppliers and ecosystem partners to make that happen?
That's a very good question. You know, we feel like we carried the industry for 4 years. And I think going forward, we'd like the ecosystem to grow up in a way where the technology, the products, the solution come and it's a plug and play, right? And so for that to happen, there's a level of, I would say, work that the stakeholders group, the OEMs, the people who provide the products and technology, really need to spend time making that whole thing matured enough. By the time it comes into our shop, it's there, right? And I think that's our biggest ask from an ecosystem perspective, because I don't think we want to carry another 4 years of the same. We want a larger ecosystem. We want the partners in the ecosystem to be really growing, developing, and getting their software to a level of maturity and resiliency that once we put in production, it really works. So that's what we are asked.
Understood. And Jefferson, from Accenture perspective, what do you see also with regards to developments in the market for the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I think the first one that's really important to build off what Satish just said is like making sure that we're creating an environment where we can actually create that interoperability. We can create that kind of testing environment so that that is able to deliver it to an operator. So I think the interoperability, the testing part is the first biggest important piece that we hope to accelerate. I think the next point, as you call it, AI continuum, I think it's probably breaking a myth that's incredibly important. Right now, everybody's kind of chasing this point around AI, and it's very exciting. It's a huge opportunity for revenue and cost savings, but it requires compute, it requires storage, it requires network. So breaking that myth to say, like, you can chase the AI point, but there's an incredible dependency upon cloud and edge and the importance of AWS and the cloud partners, right? So just making sure that we're kind of staying focused on the fundamentals of how to deliver that AI promise is the second one, breaking that myth. And I think the third one is just making sure that we're able to look forward and figure out how to figure out the benefit of this, right? If it's just a TCO play, I think we've tried that for 4 years, and that's only gonna go so far. We have to get past that TCO story, and it has to come to, this is going to help you generate more revenue generating units. This is going to help you drive some new service that's going to drive revenue. This is going to help you prepare for 6G. Otherwise, we're going to spend a lot more money and a lot more time, and we're not even going to get to that level. So I think those are the three things.
Yeah, great, and also delivering a better flexibility to react faster to customer demand. Of course, that's also so great. Thank you so much. Is there a final word you would like to share with regards to the topics we discussed?
I would say O-RAN is reality and it's the future. In fact, we're already on the 5.5G as far as I'm concerned.
So, Justin?
We're just looking forward to participating and working with everybody. It's an exciting time for the industry.
Great. Denise?
Future is now.
Great. And collaboration is key. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Big applause for the panelists.
All right. So we're going to do some quick stage management up here. So while they're quickly changing the chairs, poll for the audience. How many of you are enjoying your stay in Dublin so much that you had a hard time making it here this morning? You went out too late at too many pubs and heard great music. Raise of hands. Did you hear some traditional music last night? Anybody? Nobody? One person? Two person? How about visited a pub in Temple Bar? Anybody visited a pub in Temple Bar? Yeah, yeah? Good. Got in some Christmas shopping. I did. Anybody? Christmas shopping? All right. Let's see, what other things have we seen in Dublin? Anybody make it to Dublin Castle? Oh, there's one person. I went on a dark Dublin tour. That was interesting and kind of shocking. Anybody do any fun walking tours? Haunted tours? Anything like that? On Sunday, I got here Saturday morning very early. Sunday afternoon, I rode a little vintage bus around the city while having tea, which was amazing. So I highly recommend that if you get a chance to come back. It was a cute little bus painted with characters on it. It was very fun. So I think we're ready. Let's bring on our next group of speakers. We're going to have a case study with NTT's Hideki-san and Tom from IPfusion. Let's bring them out.
All right, good morning. So today we're just going to spend a few minutes and talk a little bit about technology and innovation between two partners, NTT and IP Infusion. And I thank Ishizawa-san for joining me here today. We'll go on to, oh, I did not get my clicker. Thank you. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about some of the things that we've done historically. And we'll move on to some of the things that we're doing today, both in terms of TIP's Mantra project, as well as the NTT ION project that you've all heard about. And then we'll talk just ever so briefly on the advantages of a large open ecosystem. With that.
Okay, so please go to the next slide. So hello everybody, I'm Hideki Nishizawa of NTT Network Innovation Laboratories. So you may know the NTT Docomo. So NTT is a parent company of NTT Docomo. So we are our biggest operator in telecom operator in Japan, and also we are a world third data center operator. So today I'm also working as a TIP-OPT disaggregated optical systems co-lead. So TIP promoted this aggregation of cell-side gateway and optical systems, and define the requirements and open interface to develop new markets. So in addition to creating documentation, those operators, including NTT, have promoted the entry of new vendors by designing and implementing open source software such as TIE and Goldstone as a reference implementation model. So Cassini was the first result of those. So, and IP Infusion implemented the architecture and function of TIE and Goldstone on Oknos as the first mover, and has developed the white box switch ponder market. So Tom will introduce the video.
So yes, this was one of the very first implementations of the OOPT's technology in a commercial form. So it was a combination of edge core hardware, IP Infusion software, technical prowess and know-how from NTT, and ultimately we called it Cassini and brought it to market. You can see on the left-hand side that there are service providers from around the world that implemented this solution, and we brought this to market over 5 years ago. There was one particular customer that we did do an announcement with. I'll just touch on it quickly. This was a service provider based in Santiago, Chile, and they're called Mundo Pacifico. Essentially, they used this Cassini solution to build their long-haul network, and they used it to provide IPTV, internet services, voice services, layer 2 and layer 3 VPNs to both enterprises and businesses as well as to residential.
Okay, so discussion is what's the next step? So who is our customer and which market? So my answer is data center interconnect. So you may know that the data center is an emerging market. CAGR is around 14%. So the other DWDM amplification growth rate is 2%. So also our revenue side, revenue of data center interconnect accounts for 40% of entire DWDM market. So you now understood how much attractive market data center interconnect. And then NTT have joined Mantra and work with other operators to create the next innovation. So after this aggregation, what is needed next is automation. So yesterday, other speaker also mentioned these parts. So to optimally control the disaggregated devices. So we have started a demonstration of coherent module plug and play at Trinity College Dublin. Thank you very much for the TCD team. And last month, and using the data center exchange, that directly connect user data centers by an optical path without electrical conversion, which has been discussed at the ION Global Forum as a key use case. So here, good news is we have, so ION Global Forum and the TIP have established a liaison relationship. So we can accelerate collaboration much more than before. So this also a very good news. And for this R&D experiment, we used Goldstone North as a reference implementation model. We hope to accelerate commercial plug and play by applying the know-how generated from this experiment to Belganos and Oknos.
The slide is not advancing. See if it goes, nope. Okay, there we go. So IP Infusion recently completed the first POC and demonstration of this Mantra technology at our engineering center in Bangalore, India. And this is a collaboration, of course, from all around the industry, many of the world's largest operators that are here today, including Vodafone, Telefonica, MTN, NTT, of course, Deutsche Telekom, Telia, and others. And so in this commercial demonstration, we ran Oknos, IP Infusion's open operating system, on top of UfiSpace hardware, and we demonstrated this over top of OpenZR Plus technology from NEC and from Ciena. And on top of that, we ran it through IP Maestro, IP Infusion's controller that managed the OpenConfig, OpenConf, and also some streaming telemetry. So the next steps here will be a white paper that will be being published very shortly by TIP to further document the technologies and innovations coming out of the Mantra program.
Okay, so this slide shows NTT ION Network Solutions. The ION Network Solution combines the ION-related technologies of NTT and those of IP Infusion. With this solution, data center operators and telecommunications carriers can construct simple and lower-cost inter-data center networks based on 400 ZR+ for high-speed and long-distance transmission. So here we have Fujitsu FOC and NEC optical transceivers are equipped with NTT Innovative Device Corporation's photonics electronics convergence devices that achieve low power and stable transmission performance and comply with the open standard like CMIS specifications. So a switch router is realized by combining the network OS and white box switch routers, and customers can select the appropriate combination from the multiple white box switches, routers, and optical transceivers to meet their needs. So this will contribute to a 50% reduction in the construction and operation costs of the network equipment, and 40% reduction in power consumption and rack space.
As a part of the press announcement for NTT's IOWN project, IP Infusion did announce a commercial version of our 400 gig solutions for IOWN. As a part of that, we rolled out a solution atop 3 different white boxes from both UFI Space and EdgeCore, running on top of Qumran 2A silicon and also Broadcom Jericho 2C Plus silicon. And as a part of these bundles, we do offer solutions on the optics side from both Fujitsu for ZR and ZR Plus optics, as well as from NEC. And all of this is bundled together with 24/7 support to make it easy for people that are looking to transition into open and disaggregated from traditional legacy vendors.
Okay, so NTT has been collaborating with members of the IOWN Global Forum to verify technologies to implement data center exchange DCX services that directly connect many data centers. So DCX requires a connection of devices from multiple vendors between many locations with various transmission modes suitable for length and quality. The solution allows 3 benefits: high capacity per fiber with reduced space and power, cost saving through elimination of transceiver equipment, open optics integration, delivers more optics choices. Okay.
And so that was our very short summary of technology and innovation through the partnership between NTT and IP Infusion, all a part of TIP and Fyuz. It's really a powerful thing, and it's exciting to see it being put in place through real programs that can be purchased and implemented in commercial networks all around the world. I'll close by just mentioning the value of a broad open ecosystem, which I think is something that we are all fighting for here, that we want to see happen. In terms of OCNOS, in our open ecosystem at IP Infusion, we have over 600 networking features in the solution itself. We support over 40 white box platforms. I believe that's the most that's supported by any commercial disaggregated NOS today. And the open optics, which we've talked a bit about today, we have over 100 qualified optical transceivers, so it's really choice all across the board. We put that together with a centralized GUI-based management system that we call Maestro, and finally 24/7 support and the ability to purchase an entire disaggregated solution with all of those components from a single vendor with a single purchase order to make it as simple as it's been to purchase networking gear over the course of the last 30 years or so. That is our presentation. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
All right, while we're doing another quick furniture change, I just want to say that I visited a really great museum on Sunday called the Little Museum of Dublin, and I don't know if you have a couple extra days to stay here in Dublin, but it's a really neat museum, and the exhibits are all donations from people around the city. It's one room in a little house, and an actor, it's a guided tour of the little room in the house, and you sit in chairs, and people have donated everything from YouTube posters to original documents from history across the city. It's a really neat little museum. I highly recommend it. And with that, we're going to bring out our next case study here. It's with BT's Kevin Hawley and TIP's Vish. Come on out.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Vishal Mathur. I'm the Global Head of Engagement at the Telecom Infra project. We're switching a little bit from OOPT to Open RAN. Many of you know that there has been obviously a lot of work happening in the telco ecosystem around self-organizing networks. So nothing is new around managing RAN workloads. But there is a very strong trend towards moving towards SMO, RIC, XApps, and RApps. Let me introduce my colleague in arms here. Kevin, do you want to introduce yourself, Kevin?
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Kevin Hawley and I'm Industry Standards Director for BT. I've been in the industry quite a while, starting with SMS.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Kevin. And Kevin, representing BT, also sits on the TIP board and is a strong participant in a community-driven approach on industrializing the space around SMO, RICs, XApps, and RApps. Within the TIP community, we already have a subgroup within the Open RAN group, which is around looking at priority use cases that can be developed by the vendor ecosystem, where solutions that are based on RICs as well as with applications can be tested in the right way. And in that regard, actually, at the industry level, there's still work to be done. We still need to work out a way to ensure that new applications can be developed that are in demand by telecom operators. They can be ported across different RIC platforms. There can be sort of proper performance testing done against operator data network instances, as well as that management of conflict between different apps, working together or concurrently running in a network environment. What I wanted to do with Kevin is actually highlight some excellent work that's been happening in the UK. But let's start with the first question, Kevin. Perhaps you can tell me, what are BT's R&D and commercial network interests in the SMO, RIC, RApps, XApp space?
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think you're right. We are on a journey. Everybody's on a journey at different times, and I've talked to various people at this conference. We have a saying in BT at the moment, Rome wasn't built in a day, but it was built, right? So, from our perspective, we're really interested in the RIC, the SMO. We think, when you want to develop something new on your network, you're going to do it for one of three reasons. First of all, there's a customer demand. Secondly, it means you can do it cheaper. Or thirdly, it means there's some societal gain, such as reducing energy impact. So I think all of those three things can come to play when you're looking at applications that run on the RIC. And we have a test lab at our industrial park facility. My colleague Richard McKenzie is deeply involved in that. He'll be speaking this afternoon. Our industrial park is quite a large park. We have lots of streets with buildings, and we have test radios set up around there. Because it's an isolated park, it's quite easy to get a license. So we've been testing. We've got a test rig. We're working with quite a number of partners. We've had applications running on the rig from different vendors, making sure they work, and those ones have gone out to a live network. And then in the second phase, we're planning to do multiple applications running at the same time on the same rig. So, there is, you need to make sure when you've got multiple applications running that they don't kind of conflict with each other. So the first step will be get some multiple applications running and then figure out, is there something going wrong? How do you monitor that? And what sort of changes would you need to make in the ecosystem to get there?
Absolutely. Thank you, Kevin. Thanks for those points. And actually, ladies and gentlemen, the telco industry is obviously interested in seeing Rome being built in this space. It makes absolute sense when operators can manage their RAN workloads using AI and automation. But the governments, a number of governments have actually shown a lot of interest in this space as well. Of course, you may be recognizing that certain governments, such as UK DSIT, has already put some funding towards driving these types of projects. Kevin was interluding to some of the key points around what needs to be developed through, but BT has been involved in a TIP-led consortium path of doing proper testing and trial of some of these applications on RIC platforms. If you do see them, then ARI 5G and ARIANE are two projects that we've been running over the past 3 years. It would be great, Kevin, if you can just give some more detail around what types of applications had been of interest to BT. What have you seen in terms of results so far, maybe from ARI 5G, ARIANE still running? And what more do you want to see?
Yeah, okay, so one of the things that we've been looking at is, I think, quality of service. And, you know, that app seems to be working okay. Another thing is, yeah, energy management, yeah. So obviously energy management is a very important thing. When you've got multiple carriers, figuring out how many of those you actually need to have live at one time. It's very important. And also, when you've got multiple cells, do you need all the cells active all the time? Or can you turn one of them off temporarily while you've got no need for traffic in that area? So, and all of those things are looking good. Of course, we've got to see in the next phase, do these apps work together? If you find that you've got a prediction for traffic in one area, does that mean you need to turn on the base station and not have the energy management app shut it off? I think with all of these apps, it's a case of the more we get, the more ideas people will come up with, and it's having that access to the, you know, it's kind of like an API, having the access to the RIC, the API that provides, that I think will encourage the ecosystem to flourish. You know, when I, very early on in my telecoms career, I was involved in SMS, as I mentioned. One of the things that I was doing was I was pulling data from the internet and then sending that out as SMS. And I was thinking, if I hadn't had that access to SMS to deliver the messages, then I wouldn't have been able to try pulling various things from the internet and sending that out. So I think having that that intimate access to the data from the radio base station is really important, so that you can pull that back, you can reflect on what's going on. As people were saying earlier, you can build on that with AI when you've got massive data across your whole network. And I think the more that we see applications developed and put on these platforms, and the more we open them up, the more we'll see innovation.
Yeah, absolutely, fantastic. And just to add a bit more detail to what you're saying, Kevin, do have a look, actually. There's some of the vendors that have been involved in our community-based projects with BT are here. They're sponsors, and they're actually showcasing some of the applications. Energy management or power saving using load adaptive mode is actually a really key one, where you can actually look at turning cells off, and using predictive sort of traffic patterns, you can actually work out where, you know, cells don't need to be turned on, and therefore drive OpEx benefit for telcos. We've got...
It's not only OpEx benefit, by the way. You know, it's for the customer, which is really important. You know, you've got a lot of customers moving from A to B. Being able to predict that means that you won't have the congestion that you would otherwise have. So it's great for customers too.
Fantastic, absolutely. Advanced traffic steering as well, and as you mentioned, quasi optimization. These, if you imagine, go on the edge. When these three applications are available, you can turn cells off that are not necessary based upon traffic patterns. You can actually optimize this load balancing on those cells using traffic steering, and you can look at optimizing the quality of service as well, so that actually when you do have a sort of a traffic scenario where you have mobility use cases, you have IoT, you have mobile broadband running, then you can actually, as an operator, really drive forward the right optimized RAN performance as it's needed. So this is wonderful, and I think what I'd probably want to say and ask you as a last question, Kevin, is what would be your message out to the industry, to other telcos, in your mind?
Yeah, I think, you know, TIP is a great community of people. You know, we're all getting together, we're all at different levels, as I said before, but it's important to keep engaged. We're going to get there, we will build Rome. And thank you for this opportunity to talk to you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Thank you very much, everybody. That ends our little fireside chat.
All right, we have one more quick change while we bring out our next case study from Telus. Quick poll question. How many of you have been to a museum here in Dublin? Anybody? Yeah? I heard the National Gallery is really good. I also have heard that any museum that begins with the word national is free. So that was a tip from our taxi driver. So now that all the chairs have moved off the stage, we're going to bring out Bernard Bureau from Telus to tell us about his Open RAN deployment.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Let me see how this works. There you go. Doesn't look like the clicker is functioning. The green button. Okay, sorry, I'd like to go back one. Okay, sorry about that. So good morning, everyone, again. Thank you for the organizer for having me. I'm Bernard Bureau. I am a vice president at Telus, responsible for wireless strategy and services. And today I'm going to talk about Telus's O-RAN and vRAN journey in the brownfield environment, which started 3 years ago. But before I jump into it, let me talk very quickly about who is Telus, because I think that's going to be relevant for what we're going to be talking about. So we're one of the 3 big telecom provider in Canada. To give you an order of magnitude, our market cap is 10 to 15% of the market cap of the 3 biggest US CSPs. So while we are big in Canada, we are not very big on a global stage. We're much smaller than the big global tier 1 CSPs. So just for that a little bit of context. And now into the meat of the presentation. We are operating a network that is pretty complex, and our network is in a sharing agreement with another operator. We operate a multiple operator core network, and we operate the RAN in half of the country, and in the other half, it's our partner who does that. And that's the beauty of it, because we've got this 15-year-old now arrangement with them, and it's so reciprocal that I think it's the most successful in the industry. But it also means that our network carries more than 50% of the Canadian traffic. And to do so, we have to enable all of our spectrum, and we have to enable all of our partner spectrum as well. And as a result, our sites are equipped with 9 bands of LTE, 3 bands of NR, 48 cells on a typical 3-sector site. So a lot of spectrum, a lot of channels enabled on our towers and on our rooftops. And also to note, our network is feature-rich. I'm not gonna drain the left part of the slide, which is just a high-level view, but I think you would understand that we're not just deploying the basics. So now, why is Telus so focused on Open RAN and virtual RAN? So some of you might know, the Canadian government published a policy statement in 2022 announcing that our incumbent RAN supplier would not be allowed to be used anymore for 4G and 5G. So our first driver is obviously to replace our RAN equipment with a new one, and we need to be done by the end of 2027. So given the momentum that we saw on Open RAN and virtual RAN in the last few years, we didn't want to invest in just like for like, replacing our radios with yesterday's architecture. So we thought also, with the magnitude of our investment, we saw a great opportunity to pivot to O-RAN. But we had also other very meaningful incentives. Our second driver was to get in a position where we would never be locked in with any supplier again. whatever the reason for doing a RAN swap, they're all bad reasons, but it could be for poor performance or poor capabilities from one of your supplier. It could be for financial difficulties, or in the latest case for us, it's geopolitical context because we were quite happy with our previous supplier. But we wanted to make sure that in the future, we would not be exposed into any kind of complete swap like that. And these swaps are really painful for us, probably a bigger deal for us than for other CSPs, simply because of the complexity of our network, given the number of radios that we have, given the number of antenna ports that we have on our network. Just for FDD spectrum, we're talking about more than 70 antenna ports on our towers, which is really high. With O-RAN, we saw an opportunity to simplify our deployment with more compact radios. And lastly, and I think we've heard a lot about this yesterday and today, we're very excited about the opportunities that come with automation, with the SMO, with the RIC. Of course, it's going to be helpful in terms of TCO, but it also unlocks a level of optimization that is nearly impossible to achieve without having access to the O-RAN Alliance interfaces. With so many channels in our network, so many things to balance, like for us, it's almost mission critical. So we had plenty of good drivers, and the timing for O-RAN introduction was really important to us because, as I said, we need to be done by 2027, and we wanted to maximize the footprint that we would have it with O-RAN. Now let's look at our priorities for selecting the O-RAN building blocks. So our first priority, very important, was to have an O-RAN construct that would match or exceed our performance that we had with our traditional RAN, and that could also handle the complexity of our network. Secondly, we needed to have feature parity. You remember on the last slide, we had a list of high-level features, but we couldn't have parts of our network that had those features and other parts that didn't. So feature parity was very, very important. The third aspect is that we needed to have an O-RAN deployment that would cost less than traditional RAN. Very important too. And the fourth one in our list of top priorities was to avoid any vendor lock-in. So that means no proprietary hardware for both 4G and 5G. It means no inline card. We needed to have the ability also to interoperate a third-party radio operator supplier of our choice with the baseband supplier that we had chosen. And after we made up our mind about suppliers for baseband and radios, we also decided, let's not try to complicate the deployment, let's not try to complicate things, let's just pick the server, the CAS, the OS that our baseband supplier had been supporting for the longest time. And so our deployment is based on Samsung Networks virtual baseband, which has feature parity with their traditional RAN, HP servers based on Sapphire Rapids EE platform, Wind River CAS, and a mix of Samsung open radios and a third-party radio supplier. One of the great aspects with working with agile and customer-oriented radio suppliers is the ability for an operator the size of Telus to participate in the product design and roadmap, which is very important to us. You can imagine that with the number of channels and bands that we have, that there's a lot of efficiency that can be done by using the right product for the Canadian ecosystem. And at Telus, I'll be very transparent. We hate to be told by our suppliers, these are the specs and you take it or leave it. This is not how we work. So now we use a mix of double and triple band radios, and what used to be 21 radios on cell sites has gone down to 12, so a meaningful reduction. Samsung is also providing the open dual band massive MIMO radio unit. Moving on. Since we started our beta deployment in Q4 of last year, and this year we've been continuing our deployment, and now we're in full speed ahead in terms of the deployment, I can attest that with a lot of empirical data to prove it, that the performance of our O-RAN construct actually exceeds the one on traditional RAN. So that I think you can really put a check mark against that. That is no longer a concern for us. Whether you look at throughput, voice drop call rate, accessibility, latency, like we've achieved all the performance objectives. And I think it's because Samsung Networks has, like I said, feature parity, but when you look, double click on it, you have also the same exact algorithms that manage the air interface, whether it's traditional RAN or virtual RAN. And the other thing that I think plays a big role into this is that they have implemented their layer 1 onto the Sapphire Rapids Intel platform. In terms of services, it's mission accomplished too. We've got parity between traditional RAN and O-RAN, and that made things fairly easy. We decided to procure ourselves all of the building blocks of our O-RAN construct, and that is, I believe, a key point on how we are achieving our financial targets. So we procured ourselves our own CAS. We have a deal for the CAS. We have a deal for the servers. We have a deal for the radios, and we have a deal with Samsung Networks. Now, in terms of, I think this one is going to be interesting. I'm seeing that I'm running out of time, but I started a little bit late because the clicker, somebody didn't know how to operate it. So in terms of our deployment, you're going to find that interesting. We started in 23, like I said. Now all our deployment is 100% O-RAN. This year, we're going to reach at the end 4% of our macro network. That's going to be O-RAN. When we reach end of 25, we're going to be at 18%. And then in 2027, when we finish our replacement project for the Chinese supplier, we're going to be at 47% of our macro network. And we have the plan also to every time, because we started our replacement project with a couple of years before we started deploying O-RAN. So we have about half of our network that is with traditional RAN, new traditional RAN equipment. And as we add more spectrum on them, as we need more baseband capacity, we're going to convert them into vRAN O-RAN. And we're going to use a CPRI to eCPRI converter to do so. So by the end of 29, in 5 years, we're going to be 100% O-RAN and vRAN. I'm going to move on because we're out of time. This is my last slide. I'm not going to talk so much about it, but I'm just going to provide a quick closing. I really encourage all the CSPs in this room to push existing vendors to provide a great O-RAN roadmap. That means no proprietary hardware, 4G and 5G, and performance parity and feature parity. I'm also going to highlight that, as I said, Telus is big in Canada, but we're not big on the global stage. And if we can handle O-RAN, there's a lot of CSPs that can too. So thank you for your attention, and thanks for having me.
Thanks so much to Bernard, and now we're going to bring out Shivas Nambiar from AWS, who's going to talk about artificial intelligence and how AI is accelerating the future of open.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you, everybody, for having me. I run the telco biz at AWS, and in my vantage point, my team and I have the privilege of actually working with quite a few of the operators globally. And so we spent a fair bit of time trying to think about what telcos are going to end up doing over the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And really, if you have spent any time with telcos in the last 18 months, they've all been talking about AI and Gen AI. And it's not something new, right? Telcos have been operating in this space for a while. The existing path seems to be, let's take all of this data that we've generated, how do we start to use it to drive insights for our customers, do more for our customers. That theme has just started to accelerate in the last 18 months. And so here, I want to spend a little bit of time kind of talking about the things that we're learning and the things that we think are going to happen over the next few months. So if you think about telcos, why is AI and Gen AI so interesting? If you look at the value chain of what makes up an operator across the board, this is, I think, the first time a general purpose technology has come in, and we see applicability across the range of everything that makes up an operator. Everything from like if you're an old telco head like I am, and I've spent 20 years in the industry, the old story about LB cups, right? The learn, buy, get, use models that you have. Every piece of that can be touched by AI. And so if you start to think about how does a telco apply AI, in the past it was a lot harder. You had all of these data sets that were sitting all over the place. Managing how to put it together, how to drive the insights was hard, and we still did it because there was still value in that insights. And it was gritty work. It was a lot of like managing the data, controlling what this data was able to do. Gen AI is giving our customers the ability to do that much better at faster pace. If you think about what are the key things that telcos will need to do to take advantage of these capabilities, I'll tell you the good news. The good news is telcos have traditionally done well in 3 areas that are fundamentally important to using all of this data for Gen AI. Governance and compliance of the data, nationally critical infrastructure where most telcos are expected to protect and secure data for their consumers. Telcos do this well. Data sovereignty, protecting the data within the laws of the countries that they operate within. Security and privacy, in most cases, telcos do a really good job. So this is the good part. Telcos should be able to, compared to many other industries, do this better than other industries. So why do we not think that telcos are moving as fast as they could? I think at Amazon, we think in terms of flywheels. And I'll tell you about the flywheels that we want. In the telco ecosystem, there are 4 areas that we think we're seeing a lot of interest, excitement, and even use cases. So the first one is really, should be natural. Telcos run some of the largest call centers in the world. And so there's a natural transition from telcos going through their digital and omni-channel journey to saying, no, in my call centers, I can do a lot better. I can personalize better. I can provide the next best action, the next best offer better. And those workflows, they have high value. If you think about those workflows, and they trigger, in some cases, truck rolls, in some cases, a fair bit of calls back and forth into the call centers. Being able to target those and try to drive personalization into those conversations to reduce the number of calls coming in, to reduce the number of truck rolls, and in many cases, to actually improve NPS. That's what telcos are very excited about. And you can see, we've seen Globe and Deutsche Telecom and others talk publicly about how they've done this with Gen AI capabilities. The second set of workflows we're seeing is telcos, most of them have large engineering organizations. And so having these engineering organizations really think about how to build for this new Gen AI-enabled environment. And one of the things that we're seeing is these engineering teams being given access to Gen AI-enabled coding assistance, right? Where you take all of this undifferentiated heavy lifting that people were doing to build products, and we're accelerating that process. And you've seen people like British Telecom talk publicly about how they've been able to take 1,200 developers at last count, give them access to this, and now they're starting to generate almost 30, 40% of their code in real time with the acceptance levels that are good. And so that'll help them build better engineering organizations. The third area that we're seeing interest in, which is the one that I'm actually really excited about, is if you look at network and business operations. This is where for decades we have collected all of these data in silos. And as I mentioned, we spent a lot of time really trying to clean this data, manage this data, build the correlation engines for this data. And it's been so hard. What we're seeing though now for the first time is customers of ours like Cox Communications, they've been able to connect all of these data points, bring them into a model where they are putting the right controls around this data, and then through a chat-enabled interface, allow their technicians, for example, to come in and query and understand when something is breaking, figure out what is breaking, query it quickly and identify the pain point. Once they're there, then go back and query again, what is the next best action they could be taking? And in doing all of that, they've actually publicly talked about how they've taken the most complex of these cases where they've spent 8 hours, maybe sometimes a day in troubleshooting these issues and brought that down to minutes. So that's like the vision of what we could be doing for network operations and business operations in general. So that's the third area that we're seeing these flywheels build up. The final area that we're seeing is for a few of the telcos and operators that are forward-leaning, there's an interesting nuance. They are also looking at using generative AI to go build better revenue opportunities. Whether it's a tier 1 in the US that is looking at taking the enterprise networks that they manage and building custom GenAI-enabled dashboards that allow an enterprise customer to really see the gamut of everything that they're being managed. Or if you look at somebody like a Telus and look at what they're doing in terms of taking the home, smart home environment where they have so many ecosystems to work with and building a next generation GenAI interface to manage it with an attempt to take that smart home ecosystem and build revenue generating opportunities there. This set of new opportunities which are revenue building is an exciting new avenue that we're seeing. So if you think about these flywheels that you build around each of these workflows, the question is, how do you go do this faster, right? How can a operator come in and figure out how to do this over and over again and faster? And the first thing I'd say is in our learnings, when we went out and surveyed 300 operators in partnership with TM Forum, they came back to us and said, well, 30% of us think we'll run multiple GenAI use cases across many domains. So they're all excited about doing it. But they also came back and said earlier this year that only 14% of them have more than 10 use cases in production today. So a huge big gap between wanting to do it and being able to do it. And then you drill in a little bit deeper, and what they tell you is like, they think 75% of them think they don't have the talent and the knowledge to make the right decisions to drive this journey. Now that's staggering when you think about these folks who are actually the decision makers in these industries, in these organizations, coming back and telling us that they don't think they can make the right technology choices sometimes. They don't think they have the talent to do it. They don't think they have the depth of talent. And this is critically important in an environment where the change is so rapid. So what that means is we've got to think as an industry and figure out how we go enable in these organizations the path to driving this innovation, this experimentation, without getting into the mindset long-term of, hey, I need to go do the same thing I did with large capital investment, which is typically what most operators have done. And so when I look at the most forward-looking of these organizations and how they're building these flywheels, there are three things that they're doing really well, and I would recommend to everybody. The first one is building platforms, and these platforms have to enable choice. The choices that you're making around what models you're using, what fine-tuning you're going to do, all of that needs to account for the fact that this industry is moving so fast, and you need to be able to swap these out without actually having to go back and rebuild all of the controls you've built. So companies that are building platforms and gateways of that kind, they're actually able to enable a bunch of different use cases through this platform for all of their different lines of business. The second one is you need to find a partner that will help you drive down cost. I've had conversations with CDOs where they tell me in production, it's taken them 4x, 5x the cost that they thought they would need to actually enable their use cases, which means they can do only a fewer use cases. And if you go back and look at all of the areas that it could be impacting, you want a trajectory of cost to go down. And third, you have to enable experimentation. So the biggest part of all of this is getting your teams to just start. And I worry that we are focused and fixated on just doing the capital intensive, go build large infrastructure conversation versus where we should just go out and start something, and you will see over time it is increasing in value for your business. If there is a way that AWS or I can help you as you go through this journey, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to spend some time after this. We're really excited about the opportunity here for telcos to take this technology space and use it to transform the rest of your business. Thank you.
All right, while we're getting ready for our next panel, more chair changes on stage, I thought it would be great for everybody to just stand up, give yourself a couple minutes to stretch. We've got 5 chairs to bring out, so it's going to take a couple minutes, and we've got tables with water. While we're doing that, let's see. Anybody visited any great pubs that they want to shout out as a good recommendation? I went to the Cobblestone last night, a tiny little pub off the beaten track, 10 traditional musicians playing, just improvising with each other. It was spectacular. Has anybody else visited any great pub they want to shout out? Anyone? Anybody local that lives here that would recommend a great pub for traditional music? I went to Oliver St. John Gogarty's. That was also great. If you go to the second floor, there's traditional music. I must say, it's been hard finding traditional music. Lots of contemporary musicians playing, and lots of people dancing. If you're here on the weekend, lots of hen parties, bachelor parties. But traditional music, amazing. All right, so I think we're almost ready. Any more little coffee tables? Are we good? Oh, 2 more tiny tables. Water, very important. Keeping people hydrated. All right. With that, I'm going to bring out our next panel, moderated by Kelly LeBlanc of IPfusion. It's about the operational challenges on the procurement process of disaggregated technologies. So let's get the flywheels going with Kelly.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our panel on the operational challenges on the procurement process of network disaggregation. I'm Kelly LeBlanc, the Chief Marketing and Product Officer of IPinfusion. IPinfusion's a networking software company. We've been in business for 25 years, providing open networking solutions and helping customers transition to network disaggregation. So what I'd like to do is have our panelists introduce ourselves. We have 4 very special panelists today. We've all been working together in the ecosystem to make this happen, so let's start with Alan.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Alan Fagan. I'm the Vice President of Sales for the Americas for EPS Global. I'm based in Boston, Massachusetts, but I actually grew up about a 20-minute walk from where we're sitting right now. EPS Global is a value-added distributor, and we specialize in open networking solutions. So we work with the best in breed of software providers, hardware manufacturers to put together solutions for our customers. We're headquartered in Dublin, and we have 28 global locations.
Thank you, Alan. And Sanjay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sanjay Kumar. I'm the Vice President for Product Management and Marketing at Arcus. We provide a programmable network operating system that can run on any kind of hardware, multiple form factors. We enable use cases all the way from the edge to the core and into multi-cloud environments as well. Happy to be here.
Thank you, Sanjay. Edgard.
Thanks, Kelly. So good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be on this panel together with you. And my name is Edgard. I'm handling business development activities at EdgeCore Networks. I am based in Germany. And at EdgeCore, we are the pioneer of open networking solution. We deliver disaggregated solution end-to-end from access to the core. As well, we deliver solution to data center and for AI. Thank you.
Thank you, Edgard. And Lloyd.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly. It's a pleasure to participate in this panel this morning. My name is Lloyd Mpahlele. I'm the General Manager responsible for transport and OSS tools in MTN Group. MTN is headquartered in South Africa. Operates, it's a Pan-African entity operating mainly in Africa and a little bit of in the Middle East. So we're providing mobile, fixed. We've got some platforms that we running as well. Those kind of services across all of this market, including things like mobile money, etc. We have just over 280 million subscribers, across that footprint. So yeah, thank you so much. Happy to be here.
Great. Well, we're looking forward to a lively discussion. And I think we should start off with, let's just go around and talk a little bit about each of our journeys with network disaggregation. I think there are challenges that we've been learning along the way from our various perspectives, whether building solutions or consuming solutions. So in fact, let's start with Edgard. And what's your view?
So thank you, Kelly, for facilitating this discussion. Actually, it's a great and very important topic to highlight the main challenges in disaggregated solution. And I hope by the end of this session, we will be able to share our experience and how we were able to facilitate this deployment and how we were able to offer a great experience to all our partners and customers. So to begin, I would like to share some feedback from our customers who were sharing some concerns about considering disaggregated solution in their network. So the first thing was they were dealing with multiple key players in this ecosystem. There is too many decisions to be to take care, and this will be showing some of the challenges in terms how to deploy the technology, and showing the solution maybe might little bit complex. What we've been doing together with STIP and the ecosystem, we've been validating the technology from the engineering perspective, the technology being proved and accepted, but we've been always need to take into consideration that organization is built with multiple business units, and we need to consider commercial and legal. And as well, those units were showing some challenges by dealing with every single vendor in this ecosystem. And sometimes they had to draft contracts based on each or one of us of the responsibilities. So what we've been doing in response to that, we've been working and we've been doing a great collaboration, strong collaboration with Infusion, Arcus, and all our software vendors. In addition, we've been having a great partnership with our value-added distributor in order to deliver a unified, simple experience for disaggregated solution. So we enabled a turnkey solution through our partners, and we were trying to deliver the same experience that customers were receiving from the traditional solution.
Okay, very good. I think let's get Sanjay's view on this as well.
Thanks, Kelly. So I think while we're talking about the challenges, I think it's important to acknowledge that disaggregation is ready for prime time, and that the ecosystem, just like Edgard was mentioning, has been working to solve all of the different challenges, from whether it's from a procurement perspective or from a deployment perspective. I think customers have begun to realize the benefits of disaggregation, so whether it comes to faster pace of innovation, the ability for them to have more flexibility and choice, at the same time lowering the total cost of ownership. And when it comes to the challenges, really what we've heard customers say, just like Edgard was saying, is, how can you help me continue to get choice while delivering an experience that is near similar to what they used to with legacy vendors? How can you make the whole process frictionless while putting all of these different components together? How do you orchestrate and coordinate amongst all these different elements? And to that extent, I think all of us, whether it's IP Infusion, EdgeCore, UFI Space, EPS Global, have done an incredible job of being able to manage all those pieces together. At Arcus, for example, we've taken some approaches where we've shepherded the entire process all the way from POC through deployment and offering a single point of contact for support. But for some other customers, they would prefer to have system integrators involved in that entire process and take it all the way from cradle to grave, so to speak. So I think there's an enormous opportunity, and the compute industry has figured this out. There's no reason why we can't in networking as well.
Very, very good, and I think it's a good opportunity to shift the focus and hear a little bit from the value-added distributor view from Alan.
Yeah, I think Edgard and Sanjay have done a really good job in describing what I would call a perceived challenge that customers have in shifting from what they're used to and having a single vendor and a monolithic solution to having a multi-vendor. And we at EPS Global and other system integrators have add value by mitigating those problems. And we've been doing that now for almost a decade in the open networking space. And what we do is we help customers, first of all, to identify the appropriate solution for the problem that they're trying to solve, and then figure out what the right mix of hardware and software is for them. And we'll take it a step further then, in that we will actually procure, or many times we'd actually have the hardware in stock, pull it from our inventory, load it with software, and really configure that solution for them. And as mentioned earlier, the goal here is to maintain all the benefits of the disaggregated networking, but provide a customer experience that the customer is used to getting from the traditional vendor. Ultimately, what we find very often is what the customer initially perceives as being a challenge actually becomes one of the multi-vendor piece becomes one of the biggest advantages of open networking.
All right, I think it's time for an operator view. So what do you say, Lloyd?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. I think, you know, between Edad and Sanjay and Alan, they've really, you know, covered or allayed some of, you know, the fears that, you know, as operators, it was one of the things, you know, that spooked us. I mean, you know, the transition, right, from, you know, what we are traditionally used to, you know, to where we're going with open and, you know, and disaggregation. So firstly, I think just the mindset, okay, that today we have an integrated solution. Of course, it's a multi-vendor environment because it's competitive. I mean, you can't just have a single vendor, you know, running amok, you know, in the network. There's a couple of things that, I mean, we wanted to fix, and then we saw, you know, the open and, you know, and disaggregation as the solution to that. So we had to work a little bit, you know, around, you know, the mindset that, look, moving from, you know, an integrated solution towards a disaggregated, you know, solution wasn't necessarily a complicated thing. So that was one of, you know, the first hurdles. And then, you know, the company is not postured to accommodate, you know, the disaggregated solution because it's inherently different from, you know, what we have, you know, today. So, you know, procurement and legal processes, you know, were also, you know, a hurdle. You know, accommodating, you know, the open and disaggregated, you know, solution. So some work needed to be, you know, done around that. And then there's also the apprehension around whether or not the technology can stand side by side with, you know, existing, you know, technology, okay? So that had to be, I think, you know, one of the key challenges, but also, you know, the TCO itself on the commercial end that, I mean, once you've addressed all of this, then what about, you know, the TCO? Does it make, you know, any sense? Does it bring any value? So, yeah, those I would say, you know, were the main headline challenges, you know, just the mindset shift from what used to be to where we're going. The procurement environment, and then the technology and, you know, TCO, yeah.
And from everything that I've heard from this panel so far, what really resonates is the need for case studies. And one of the things that we've been really focused on in IP Infusion is publishing cases of these transitions. So we've had now 375 customers who've made the transition to open networking. There have been many lessons learned along the way. In fact, we've been working with EPS Global on many of these. So why don't we start with Alan and talk a little bit about some case studies, some lessons learned, some key takeaways.
Yeah, I think, like you mentioned, Kelly, we have a lot of examples of successful deployments. And I'm going to talk about three in particular that we have published case studies on with IP Infusion. The first one is Unity Fiber. And they're the second largest independent fiber provider in the US. Another is Metalink, and they're one of the top independent ISPs in the US. And then VTS are the largest ISP in Burkina Faso. And there were some key benefits that these customers saw when transitioning to open networking. And for Unity, the cost savings were very notable. Compared to their you know, incumbent vendor, they were able to get a fully fledged router at 1/3 of the costs of the incumbent, and with offering 5 times the number of network interfaces. And they also saw significant energy savings. The monolithic chassis that they had in place was drawing 50 to 60 amps of DC, and the new solution that we provided reduced that drawdown to 6 to 7 amps. So, you know, an incredible drop. For Metalink, you know, as well as the cost and energy savings, the speed of deployment was a huge benefit for them. During COVID, they saw a really significant spike. I think it was about 400% spike in the bandwidth required to service their customers. And they needed to react quickly to that spike in demand. And they looked at upgrading their network using the traditional vendor that they had, the incumbent vendor. They were told it was an 18 to 24-month lead time, so it just wouldn't work for them. They engaged with us, and with us working with IP Infusion and with EdgeCore, we were able to deploy their network in 3 months. So again, significant difference. And in Burkina Faso, the energy efficiency of the disaggregated approach really resonated with them. They deployed fanless routers and the power by solar energy sources, and they were able to put those into remote and environmentally sensitive areas. And all of these benefits and lots more are in the case studies on our website. But I think the key takeaways, for me from this is that this technology is mature, okay? We're deploying it globally into diverse use cases. And also that there's help for you out there. If you want to try out open networking, you want to investigate it, talk to us. You're not on your own. You don't have to try and figure all this out your own. We're here to help with that.
Oh, those are really rich case studies. Thank you. I'd like to get another technology vendor perspective on this. So Sanjay, what's your view?
Sure, thank you. Very interesting case studies, and thank you for sharing that. At Arcus, we've been delivering disaggregation at scale. So whether it's with tier 1 mobile operators like SoftBank Mobile, or whether it's leading data center operators like NPCI in India, or cloud operators like CoreSite in North America, we've been helping them really deploy disaggregated solutions that allow them to deliver new services on top, monetize their network, at the same time get a much more agile network that delivers more choice and lowers the total cost of ownership in general, right? The benefits of disaggregation. I think the key takeaways, the learnings for us through this journey have been, number one, it's given us the opportunity to sort out any kinks in the system as far as procurement is concerned, as far as contractual agreements are concerned, as far as deployment is concerned, as far as ongoing support is concerned, and the ability to pull all of these elements together. That's been one of the key learnings. What we've also found is that it's essential to have tight coordination all the way from the chipset through the ODMs that we pick with the software on it, and then have ongoing support. So that's been one key learning for us. I think the second thing that we've learned is interoperability is an extremely important part of this entire journey. So making sure that our platforms not only are interoperable with other vendors in the brownfield network, but at the same time, also with the myriad of choices around cables and optics and so on and so forth. In fact, to take care of that, we have a solutions engineering team that actually will mimic the customer's network to make sure that it's well tested and validated before we actually put it into production. Another learning that we've had is make sure that we're able to help our customers with a diversity of supply by qualifying multiple ODM platforms. And then last but not least, how do you provide a single point of contact from a support perspective so that the customer has one phone number to call rather than trying to coordinate amongst the different elements. So those are some of the key learnings really that we've had in this entire journey, and I invite you all to speak with us as to how we can help.
Thank you, Sanjay. And I think one thing we should talk about when we speak about case studies, it's always fun to have news that's hot off the press. So today, even this morning, a couple hours ago, MTN and IP Infusion announced a press release together on how we're working together with network disaggregation. So of course, this begs the question. Well, I'd like to get your view. When you brought the disaggregated cell site gateway through the commercial process, how did it go? Any lessons learned?
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. I think it's also a demonstration of our commitment in this journey. doing all of these things together, partnering, doing the media releases. So I'm actually glad that, it's out there and that it is clear that, we are in it, for the long run. So maybe firstly, let me just acknowledge what Alan and Sanjay have said earlier. I think it's really heartwarming, Alan, that we are not alone. I think that's a very, heartwarming statement. And Sanjay, from your end, I think you touched on very key aspects of what we're grappling with, just making sure that the procurement issues are being ironed out, the contractual issues. And you touched on something that, we haven't really spoken about, the operational issues, because that's the biggest apprehension, because once, the network is laid out, then that becomes, the Achilles heel if it's not done properly. So just some experiences from, our end. I think all the way back in 2020, once, the company sort of like agreed to go down, this route, we had to do a lab test just to prove that, the concept in a very controlled environment, works. And then we progressed, I think, in 2021 to roll out commercial, POC in 3 of our African markets. I think 2 in the East and then 1, in the West. And I think what we were, testing there was firstly, the ability for the open and disaggregated, equipment, integrating with an existing brownfield, network, integrating into a singular network management system, and the entire operational, ecosystem. And I think, it lived up to expectation. I think as we speak now, we're still running on some of those, the boxes. And we went further to introduce the open and disaggregation as a category in, transport, just so we make sure that there's a path for the OpCos to be able to procure the products and be able to deploy them in the networks, which means that we've gone a mile to address the procurement issues that were there to allow for the product to be procured and scaled. And also on the contractual side as well. I mean, that whole single point of contact, or, a single neck to choke, if it comes to that, really. So I think, that has been, the journey, Kelly. So, the lab tests, the commercial lab trials, and then, of course, where we are now, where officially, the OpCos can procure, the products as we churn them out.
Yeah, that's a rich testament on overcoming challenges. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you.
I'd like to get another view as well from Edgar. What challenges have you discovered and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so a primary operational challenge that we've been facing, it's how to manage the support while having a multiple vendor. And the main concern of customers if that vendors will start blaming each other, and like they will say, no, it's a hardware or it's a software issue. But to be honest, it is not the case anymore. And as Sanjay was saying, that Arcus having now the capability to deliver end-to-end solution. The same thing we are doing with IPI. We've been creating like an IPI Pro solution where we will be enabling a single point of contact. This is already being delivered. It's in production. We have been going through like a very detailed procedure, MOUs, just to clarify and identify each vendor's responsibility. So we will be offering customers a single point of contact, single portal, single ticketing system, and in the back end, we will be all the vendors working together as well with a value-added distributor like EPS. We have a lot of successful use cases. They've been able to deliver as well on-site support, next business day, 4 hours replacement. So all this experience that we've, like customers being able to receive from traditional solution, now it's available from disaggregated model. It's already, as I mentioned, in production. And we've been receiving a lot of positive feedback, and this is one of the feedback from MTN. And we are inviting as well more customers, more telcos to join this journey.
Thank you, Edgar. I think there's a couple other challenges that we must speak about as well. Coming to mind, hardware shortages, RMAs, these are topics that come up in almost every discussion. So, Alan, what is your view?
Yeah, there's one other point I'd just like to make, Kelly, because it's apparent during the discussion that we're talking about a lot of large deployments like MTN and some of the case studies that we talked about. Open networking is not only for large deployments. We work with very small rural ISPs, so don't feel intimidated if you're a small operator. Come and talk to us and we can help. To the question then, Kelly, yeah, I mean, hardware shortages, they're actually mitigated by the fact that the software, Sanjay talked about it earlier, the multiple hardware, multiple ODMs that are qualified to work with the software. So if one switch goes end of life, there are very often options to go with another manufacturer or another switch from that manufacturer. I also mentioned earlier, we talked about the Metalink, and that's a really good example where they needed a network deployed quickly. When we engaged originally, we had specified one particular edge core switch. It turned out there was not good availability for that at the time. Working with edge core, we actually found inventory in South America of another switch that was qualified. We were able to get that quickly and able to deploy Metalink's network in time. So that was a real advantage to this having multiple switches qualified. And also as a distributor, we carry inventory. We have stock on the shelf. So again, it mitigates against those shortages and allows us to deliver quickly. End of life then, we talked about it, is also mitigated by the multiple choices. And we also, we would see our role as a distributor as well, working with the manufacturers and managing end of life, getting notifications in a timely manner and delivering those to our customers so they can plan accordingly.
Yeah, this is very important, Alan. Thank you. I'm also wondering about emerging markets. So, Lloyd, let's have you speak a little bit about what can organizations in emerging markets do to overcome these challenges and ensure a successful network disaggregation deployment?
Yeah, look, I think we've been sort of like talking about that in the panel so far. I think key, amongst that, coming from an emerging market, myself, is the, the procurement, processes, just to ensure that, they're ready to accommodate the open and disaggregated, solutions. I think that's very, very key. And then the commercial models. Shifting from just having a single hardware software vendor to, splitting the hardware software and introducing, the SI, in there. It's very, very key. From our own, perspective, we went through the commercial, process, and, our single point, becomes the SI. And in certain cases, the software vendors where, they've got, the capability built in. But what's key from our end, and because of our large footprint, is that from a procurement, perspective, then we source. We've got the advantage of the economies of scale, so we keep, the sourcing, to our end. So the technology, I think, that is sold. If we get these elements, then I think we should have the deployment and the scale that we desire. Thank you.
Great, and we're almost out of time now, so we have just one last question. I want to know let's get first from Sanjay. What is the one key success factor you do believe will encourage customers to take network disaggregation as a solution? The one key thing.
I think the maturity of the processes is going to be extremely important. I think the mindset of innovators like Lloyd and the MTN group is really important in helping unlock all of this. But it takes a village at the end of the day. And I think, I thank TIP for putting all of us together, developing this rich ecosystem that can actually deliver the promise of choice and the freedom from a lock-in. So I'm quite encouraged by where things are and invite operators to really give this a go. and be confident about being able to deploy disaggregation at scale.
Okay, excellent. And Edgar, one key thing.
So my final message today, I would like to share that disaggregation and open networking is real. It is not anymore just a theory. At EdgeCore, we will continuously evolving our technology to meet the growing demands for innovative networks. And my final call is, like, to all the attendees, I'm inviting you to visit our booth. All contracts are ready. We've been working with all our partners. You just need to sign, and we are happy to serve you. Thank you.
All right, I'd like to thank all of my panelists, and thank you to the audience for joining us today.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you again to Kelly LeBlanc and that excellent panel. Next up, we've got another panel. This one is talking about industrializing open transport and IP over DWDM. And the moderator is Dimitra from University of Bristol. So with that, I'm going to bring out Dimitra and her awesome panel.
Good morning, and welcome to this panel on industrializing open transport and IP over WDM. I'm Dimitra Simeonidou from University of Bristol, and I'm going to be moderating this panel, where we are going to discuss about the opportunity or the emergence or the re-emergence of IP over WDM, where actually we are having this paradigm. We have optical interfaces sitting exactly on the IP router, creating an opportunity for multi-vendor open optical transport architectures for the future. Now, if we are seeing where we are at the moment, that my panelists are going to say much more about this, but we all see that in our network infrastructures, that coexistence of transponders, discrete transponders, or IP over WDM pluggables. So we are going to discuss if that actually is going to drive the coexistence of multiple vendors as well in the infrastructure, and what the opportunity is going to look like. We're also going to be discussing challenges, and those challenges are going to be technology challenges, operational challenges, but also market challenges. But it's not going to be myself that is going to be debating this. They're going to be my distinguished panelists. So before we start, can I ask you, each of you in line, to actually introduce yourselves very, very quickly to the audience?
Good morning. My name is Harald Bock. I work for Infinera. In Infinera's CTO office, I look at the evolution of network architectures, and I'm responsible for our standard strategy.
Good morning, my name is François Moore. I work for Fujitsu. I'm a technology advisor in everything optical.
Hello, I'm Paul Gunning from BT Research and Network Strategy, and I look at the future evolution of the network.
Hello, Chris Aspel. I work for Liberty Global. I'm in the core network innovations team. We look at everything IP optical, and we advise all of our affiliate companies as well as look after our own network and make sure that we set out the strategy going forwards. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. My name is Jean-François Bouquier. They call me Jeff, it's easier. I work for Vodafone in the network strategy and architecture department in the transport product team. And my background is IP MPLS, and in the last years, optical and SDN.
Thank you very much, all. So to start with, I would like us to focus not specifically on IP over DWDM, but look the overall opportunity around open, disaggregated optical transport. And my first question would be, what do you think are the operational and financial shifts that actually driving this opportunity towards open optical transport? Shall we start with you, Jean-François?
Yeah, I think the disaggregated path started with the IP domain. So with the DCSG, you heard all these days, the disaggregated cell-site gateway, and then the multi-vendor SDN management for those solutions. And the main goal was to introduce a multi-vendor, as you mentioned, in the network. And then the next steps was for optical to introduce as well multi-vendor, but it is a much closer technology. And finally, what was chosen is the partial disaggregation. So as Dimitra, you mentioned, and the benefits were clear because you remove the vendor lock-in for the transponders, and you enable higher number of players, which is fostering innovation. And then in TIP, in the MUST optical group, we focused in the beginning on end-to-end SDN management solutions, which finally are key enablers of the IP over DWDM, ZR plus pluggables. And this enables to reduce cost, and also it is the deployment. And of course, with the ZR plus, you have also the benefits for the power consumption savings and the space savings.
Thank you. Chris, do you have anything to add into?
Yeah, I mean, building on that, where everyone is doing this to save cost, to disaggregate, to break vendors. There is a flip side to this because now, you know, an awful lot of the vendors are using common components, and them components, you know, are going into disaggregated solutions. The vendors then are starting to lose revenue, which is causing a consolidation of the vendor market, which is what we're seeing now. We're seeing many vendors having to diversify because there isn't the money just in being a pure optical vendor. And this means that the R&D spend goes down. So we need things like TIP to help us to keep on pushing, you know, the standards and to make sure that we have good openness in everything that we do.
That's very good. So follow up on this, Paul. I mean, this is definitely, you know, a market trend, but can you actually reflect on any other trends that have actually driven towards open optical transport? And also, I would like you to comment, if possible, what do you think that the main trends are going to be in the future as well?
Yeah, right. So a few things there, Dimitra. I suppose we've been here before, so I recall maybe 20 years ago there was a lot of work around IP over DWDM, things like GMPLS. And when I reflect, I see this thing about technologies that become popular in the past. For example, coherent. BT was doing coherent in 1984. And then EDFIS came along and put it aside. And then it came back again through to Moore's Law and Kim Roberts and Nortel, Sienna. So these technologies refresh and come back again, and then there becomes a moment when they're ready. And I think we're now ready. And I think the idea of the disaggregation of the packet layer and the IP layer will start now to converge. Now, whether or not it's IP over DWDM, that IP term, I'll come back to maybe later on.
Thank you. Let's hear from our vendors now on the same question, Francois.
So, to me, one of the big advantage of an open platform like TIP and the standardization with TIP must is the reduction in the number of management platforms. It takes a lot of effort for a service provider to install a new controller. The hardware is the easy part most of the time. Installing a controller and operationalizing a controller with all the interfaces to the OSS systems and the billing systems and all of that is a very large barrier of entry. And having a single controller that has the ability to interface with multiple vendors of equipment through a standardized API, being TAPI or being OpenConfig, is extremely important to allow that single investment in a controller to be leveraged across multiple vendors. And I think this is one of the big benefits that organizations like TIP are bringing to the table by trying to create a standardized interface that everyone can adhere to and essentially not be required to install N controller for N vendor. Like every vendor requires its own controller. That is just not scalable.
I agree, completely agree. And Harald?
Yeah, I'd like to take a step back and look at this from a bigger picture perspective, which is essentially that when we are talking open transport and optical networking, we're talking about a market segment that is actually not that large. And we as an optical market usually don't have the capability to drive innovation, for example, in software all by ourselves. So what we have to do is we have to steal from adjacent markets. And from my perspective, what we're doing here is we're stealing from the IT industry right now. And we've been doing that for a long time. So the changes we see in how we operationalize networks, the changes how we drive towards disaggregation and openness are essentially us stealing from adjacent markets. We are stealing concept of abstraction in order to make it easier to integrate controllers with our networks. We're using APIs to provide interfaces towards different operational tools, which partially come directly from the IT industry, which are partially open source, developed outside the optical network market. And the whole concept of disaggregating and making sure that we can evolve individual functions in a network is something that comes from data center industry as well. So when we talk about these topics, we always have to keep in mind that it's us leveraging adjacent markets going forward.
That is good. And of course, there is an exciting opportunity in terms of technology and technology adoption. But in anything that is happening in open architectures and multi-vendor environments, there is a complexity associated with integration and wide adoption. So my question is actually the opportunity worth the price to pay in terms of complexity? And I'll go to you, Paul, first.
So TIP is mostly concerned, I think, with technical, but the complexity comes not only from, let's say, controllers, but the complexity comes from legal, commercial, supply chain, all of these other bits that are not, if you like, the remit of TIP. And I think that's something that has to be addressed. There would be a certain reluctance on the part of our main teams who operate the network about adopting something willy-nilly. It has to be robust, and you have to replicate what Infinera and what Fujitsu already do. That is a kind of a constellation of non-technical bits that wrap the whole solution. And how that's going to be done is still an open question. Who's going to do the system integration? Who's going to do the legal, commercial frameworks? Who's going to do end-to-end life cycle management from cradle to grave? Who's going to take that box when it's end of life off our hands and then recycle it? Other issues become really important.
So François, do you have any additional comments on this?
Yeah, I think when Harald said the interfaces, the open and standard interfaces are there, developed outside the optical world sometimes. I think they are there, but then we see operational difficulties in the integration, when you start really the integrations. And so this is really important to have this seamless multi-vendor interoperability. And I can give an example, for example, not with the controllers, but at the device level, with the IPoDWDM coherent pluggables. the management interface with the router. We saw recently with the Chip Mantra POC white paper that will be published in few weeks from now, that the standard is there and it is improving, but there are still gaps. So those gaps sometimes are missing parameters, but there are few. I think there are then some gaps in perhaps the interpretation and in the way that each vendor use the registers, for example, of semis when they are not strictly specified, which leads to customizations. And for operators, this means more integration time and so delay in the delivery of the solutions as well. And what I think is interesting is the cheap must approach since the beginning. I remember when we did the white paper, it was in 2020, we mentioned that it's key to have a use case-driven methodology. And I think it's key for operators and it's key for vendors to understand where are the priorities and to go with this use case-driven approach and start, for example, with discovery use cases for the topology, for the inventory, basic monitoring, basic troubleshooting. And this is really the way that things are going now.
Thank you. Chris, is integration a big challenge for you as well? Are you performing integrator's job when you're looking at multi-vendor environment?
I mean, there's been a lot of challenges. I mean, if we go back 2 years ago, we were really struggling to make these things work in our test labs. Every vendor either locked us out or implemented CMIS in a different way, different parts of CMIS, different versions of CMIS. It took a while to get that figured through, and then you get onto open config. Some people did it, some people didn't, and Yang models that didn't work properly. You know, we've struggled through all of that, and we've got to where we are now, which has been brilliant because everyone has worked together to get there. There are still a few things that are missing. LLDP snooping is something that's now broken and something we have to fix because in all your discovery tools, suddenly you can't get that association. And we will carry on working through all of these things, and the use cases are the best way to do this, but also we have to talk to our operational folks as well because at the end of the day, they have to sign these things off.
Thank you. And Harald, obviously you're providing a lot of these pluggables into the market, and can you comment on the operational and also cost implications of going that direction rather than the classical optical transponders?
Yeah, I think there are business implications and operational implications, and if you look at deploying pluggables in routers, then that is something that makes a lot of sense when you have a router, for example. So what that means is if a network operator's business is providing wholesale capacity, and perhaps not even operating a packet network along with it, then basically the use of IPoDWDM doesn't make sense. And with this simple example, I'm trying to show that this is not something that's fit for all, but where you can use pluggables in a router, you can actually reduce network footprint and cost by removing transponders. Similarly, if you use pluggables in routers, you have to be able to fully use the capacity of that plug, of that port. So depending on the performance of those pluggables, they may be the right thing to do, or it may be more efficient to put a transponder next to it even in those cases. So there are trade-offs there. There's big space where IPoDWDM can be used. And I think we heard a bit about the challenges, but from a technology perspective, I think we've reached a point where you can absolutely deploy pluggables in routers, and we actually sell pluggables into that space. I think, so from a technology perspective, from a business perspective, the picture is pretty clear. Operationally, our customers' software environments and operational environments look very different because of organizational differences. So basically, in many cases, an optical team doesn't want an IP team to change a wavelength because that could disrupt the optical layer, or the the IP team doesn't want the optical team to do any changes on the ports because that will disrupt the layer 3 of the network. So those things we have to work through almost on an individual basis because it depends on the whole software stack present.
So when you are talking about cost savings in an IP environment when you are putting pluggables, what is the timeline for saving, for the cost saving that you are projecting? Because they are not immediate. So in your network, is that something that you can discuss? Because you are looking at cost savings over longer term, correct?
There's an element of immediate CapEx saving if you don't need to buy a transponder platform.
Right.
But then there's also a longer term aspect of reduced power consumption and reduced TCO. Both of those exist, yes.
Yes, Francois, would you like to?
So I've got a couple of views on the last 2 points. The first one, you were talking about the complexity and the challenges. I think one of the big challenges that I am observing in the industry is that we all recognize that if you take a controller and a product and you connect them together, it will not automagically work straight out of the box. So there's actually an initial hurdle required to perform that integration. And this actually requires work, and it requires an upfront investment. And what we are observing is that some of the service providers, everyone is watching their operational expenses, their capital expenses, and it makes the introduction of a multi-vendor environment more challenging in the short term because of that investment. Long term, it will reap benefits, but the short-term reality sometimes stand in the way. On the second point about pluggables versus discrete transponder, there's a metric that I use. It's the lowest cost per 100 gig per kilometer. And to me, that's almost becoming a golden rule. Sometimes you can deploy a pluggable. It will be less expensive than a transponder. So for that wavelength, it's a better approach if you can do it, all operational issues being equal. Now, in some cases, the transponder might be less expensive. Why? Because you might be operating at 800 gig instead of 600. That reduces your cost per 100 gig. So that you calculate that metric for your wavelength, including the amount of spectrum you use, so it's a fraction of your ROADM network cost, the regens, the pluggables, and all of that, and the right solution in the industry for a specific wavelength will be which one can provide me the service at a lowest cost per 100 gig per kilometer. And pluggables and discrete transponders will coexist in the network because depending on the capacity and the path, not all solutions are created equal.
Thank you. So I think we all agree that open disaggregated optical transport is something that we are aspiring to get there, but we didn't agree completely on IP over DWDM, I guess. So my next question is it a game changer for getting there, or we are expecting to do something else? So I would ask Francois, you again, and if you go into this, is that our only solution, our only tool to get to open optical transport?
So IP over DWDM is a great technology to allow simplification and reduction in equipment, lower cost in the network. But it will not solve everything. It will not address every use cases. For example, one of the things I hear often is pluggable coherent is equal to IP over DWDM, and a pluggable coherent therefore must be in the router. Not necessarily. There's some cases where you do need an external piece of equipment from the router to, for example, act as a demarcation point, as Harold pointed out. You cannot put the coherent directly in the router because you do not own that router. So it is a game changer in the sense that it is collapsing the network in many applications, but not in all applications. I think the game changer that we're seeing in the industry is that historically, we were seeing DSPs for discrete optic with about 2 to 3 years earlier than its pluggable version. That is reducing dramatically. Now we're probably looking at 6 months between the discrete version of a DSP and the pluggable version. To me, that is the game changer. Because what that does is it brings IP over DWDM in the pluggable form factor available virtually at the same time as the discrete optic one. And that will have profound implication in network planning.
Thank you. So first of all, do you agree with this view?
Yes, I share that this is a game changer, and when you look at the evolution, the 400 gig ZR, ZR Plus at the beginning, or the ZR at the beginning was only DCI and, as you say, restricted to metro application. But now with the upcoming 800 gig ZR, ZR Plus, and also the 100 gig ZR, ZR Plus in the QSFP 28 factor, you see that you are more use cases, more network use cases. And in that sense, for operators, I think this is a game changer. But I agree with what you say, that it will be always also complementary, and there will be also the need for the traditional transponders. And I think the capabilities, if you look at the most important use cases, the capabilities are available today. So if you want read-only focus use cases, and now I think so I mentioned before the topology discovery and so on, but I think now there is the work is progressing for having more aspects covered from more complex life cycle management use cases. For example, I'm thinking to automated planning with physical impairment validation. I'm thinking also to automated provisioning, because at the beginning it was like the first use case, but it's not the first use case, because you can configure manually a pluggable and it will work, and it will be okay if you can at least monitor and see it in your topology. So yes, for me it's a game changer, yeah.
Thank you. So Paul, you would like to see multi-vendors in your network infrastructure. How do you think that this multi-vendor collaboration is going to look like, and what success would be for you in the next 5 years?
Well, as I said at the start, it's all commercial and legal bits, but it's also, if I could be more broad, I would say there's sort of traditionally sort of 2 different silos in the telco operator. There's an optical domain silo, a packet domain silo. And one thing, if I could suggest, that I find very exciting is a culture. And what I mean by culture is within BT, we set up kind of these squads, tech squads. And these tech squads are a combination of older people, myself, who have packet, optical, different types of experience with younger people, all together, and all putting together internal technical papers. And we all learn from it. So you would know Yurong Zhu, optical transport expert, and Adrian Smith, packet expert. But you don't, or you haven't have met the younger people who are being exposed to this. So I see a convergence. And I could see multi-vendor in the sense that, you know, at home with our home hub or something, you just plug something in, you know, a Cat5 into an RJ45, and you plug it into your laptop or whatever. It works. So everything's abstracted away. we never think about the vendor of the, the particular Cat5 cable. It's all there, it's done. I can see that happening, and I was quite interested in what happened earlier, and I didn't get a chance to really assimilate it, but the chap from AWS, and they're here now, and they're talking about Gen AI, they're talking about all these very interesting things that are coming. So I could see greater automation, things like that, and all of these ideas of interoperability and different vendors kind of been abstracted away.
Right, perfect way to close. So it's all about culture. Let's thank our panel. Thank you very much, everybody.
We're down to one more panel for the morning. After that, we'll move to lunch. So we've got one more panel, and that moderated by Dean Bubley from Disruptive Analysis. And I'll introduce Dean. This panel is going to be talking about, oops, I lost my, Dean, your panel.
Thank you. Hello.
I can't remember what your panel is about.
The panel.
It has a very long title.
It's on the screen.
Oh, yes. Enhancing connectivity with neutral host and infra sharing business models.
That's excellent. I appreciate that, and it's a nice long panel name, so everyone can come along and sit down, take their spaces while I'm repeating it. So, thank you very much, and thanks to the Fyuz organisers for inviting me to moderate this panel. My name is Dean Bubley. I'm an industry analyst and advisor, and I cover a lot of different areas, so I cover all sort of wireless technologies and some fiber as well. But an area that's of particular interest to me is shared infrastructure, whether that's for indoor use or for cities or for even national networks. And I've been writing and talking and hosting events on neutral host for about 7 years. And for me, it's one of those areas that makes a lot of sense that you have a shared network infrastructure for multiple mobile operators and other tenants. It's sort of an evolution of the tower company model. And for me, that's going to be increasingly important as we go to the later stages of 5G and also 6G, as you need to have enhanced connectivity indoors and in city areas and also in industrial locations as well, where perhaps sometimes the economics don't always support multiple parallel deployments of infrastructure by operators or others. And so this panel is not really going to focus on the technology side of it. We're going to be looking at the business models that are starting to make sense for neutral hosting, and we'll probably cover quite a few different examples. There's also a panelist who unfortunately can't be here from a country in Indonesia that has, Malaysia, where there are shared infrastructure across the whole country, but I'll maybe touch on that later on. So I'd like to get the panelists to introduce themselves. I can be a lazy moderator now and actually get other people to do the talking. I'm going to start with Michael Lundman at the end. Mikael.
Thank you so much. So Mikael Lundman, I'm CEO of Protivity. Protivity is a company providing indoor 4G and 5G networks. We do this in a very operator-friendly way. So we basically have our own CapEx. We're backed by PE and the European Investment Fund. And we basically deploy the networks, manage them, and then let the operators connect for free. So that's coming back to the business model a little bit, how we operate. We started this because we saw a number of things happening. One is in the real estate market, you do a lot of optimization of buildings, energy optimizations. And this typically blocks not only the sun rays and the infra red waves, but also the radio waves. So you start to build Faraday cages, and then you start to deploy 5G on higher frequencies. So all this combination makes it very difficult to provide indoor coverage. And the property owners, they did not have a solution to this because they can't go out and buy a mobile network. So in essence, it's quite a clear demand and also a model where they pay to solve the problem in their building. So that's short of what we do. And about me?
So that's interesting. So what essentially, as well as operators and infrastructure owners, property companies and venue owners are important stakeholder groups here. And do they understand when you speak to them, or are they coming to you, or are you going to them?
I think it's an educational journey that we're on. In the Nordic markets, we have developed a model together with the property owners where they have defined the roles and the type of solutions that they are prepared to pay for. But it is for sure an educational journey that needs to happen. And I think on top of this, I think it's worth to look at what's the revenue per square feet an operator versus a real estate owner. Typically, the operators have around 1% of revenue per square feet compared to the rent, right? So the real estate owner has 100 more reasons to actually invest and secure a good customer experience. Then on the other hand, if you look at CapEx indoor versus outdoors, it's at least a factor 10 more expensive to provide indoor coverage per subscriber. So if operators are CapEx squeezed, I think we have to find another model to finance networks.
Thanks. That's really interesting, and as I say, it brings in a whole different set of stakeholders and economic arguments. Brendan O'Reilly, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm Brendan O'Reilly. I'm the Group COO for Bolden Networks. Bolden is a telco infrastructure company where we provide telecoms infrastructure traditionally to MNOs, but we also provide active networks, Wi-Fi, private networks, etc., to venue owners, real estate owners as well. So we're in the sharing business.
And Brendan, you're I think probably unlike anyone else here, you've got a very, very large geographic footprint. Are you seeing differences around the world? What is it? Is it national markets? Is it regulatory? What makes the pattern different?
I think the big innovator in neutral host was the revenue models of the MNOs. So if you look at Europe, the squeeze that the MNOs had over the last few years in terms of their revenues has actually moved them towards sharing, which we've seen in a number of countries, and neutral host is a natural output of that. I think we're beginning to see that in other markets. But I think customer experience is probably the biggest driver in somewhere like the US, where venues and property and hotels, actually it's the experience that's driving it. So we do see different reasons for sharing, but we definitely think sharing is the answer.
Thank you very much, Brendan. Kunal, next.
Sure, yeah. Good morning or good afternoon. So I'm Kunal Bajaj. I'm the CEO and co-founder of CloudXtel. We're a neutral host based in India. We focus on last mile access, so that can be all the way from metro core fiber to last mile enterprise and tower connectivity. And as we moved up the value chain or the stack, we also do small cells hosting with about 6,000 sites. On the fiber side, we've got about 10,000 kilometers of fiber and about 800,000 homes passed on FTTH. We also we've built and run India's first shared RAN network. This is a case study that was released by TIP a couple of weeks ago, featuring what we've done on the Mumbai Railway network. And I'm also here wearing the hat of a co-chair of the Neutral Host and Infrastructure Sharing Project Group. So I know you're going to ask me questions on that.
I'll come back to that in a minute. But interesting, one point, so you're, as well as the wireless side, I know, Brendan, the same true, yeah, you're also doing fiber. And do you see synergies between sort of open access or wholesale fiber and the wireless side?
Yeah, absolutely. So particularly when it comes to small cells and venue solutions, you're going to face a lot of challenges with, if you're really trying to provide high quality, high capacity, you need to be on fiber. And last mile fiber in India is extremely difficult to do. I mean, operators themselves really struggle with it. So if we look at our small cell sites, about 60% of those are on fiber backhaul, and all of that's provided by us.
Excellent, thanks. And lastly, next to me, Jennifer from Verizon Business.
Thank you for having me. Jennifer Artley from Verizon Business. I run a team called 5G Acceleration, and if you think about Verizon Business as a $30 billion company, I run a startup, which is essentially an incubator function within Verizon Business, specifically to build out the market for neutral host and private networks. One of the most recent successes we've had has been, and actually we just launched our neutral host product in the spring, was with Cummins. Cummins is an engine manufacturer. They are a huge company, and they needed to transform their production line at an engine plant specifically in upstate New York. What they had to do was solve for the connectivity for their employee experience, which was not very good, as well as redefine how they process engines. So what we did for them was a neutral host with a private network at the same time, and that allowed them to really make sure they were covering all angles of both the user base as well as the use cases for going forward.
That's interesting, because I'll come back and ask later about the sort of humans first versus robots first approach to some of these networks. But that's interesting that it's both living in harmony and equally important at the same time. Okay, I'm now going to sort of dive into some questions. But first off, Kunal, why is it that TIP has an interest in neutral host? How does this? What's the project group? What's the purpose and deliverables?
Sure, absolutely, Dean. So we are a unique project group in the sense that we're not really looking at this from a technical perspective, like what you mentioned earlier, because we believe the journey globally when it comes to neutral host and infrastructure sharing is still, when you look beyond tower sharing, it's still in its infancy. So even just establishing the language, the lexicon of what defines a neutral host, what are the available business models, how are venue owners supposed to approach this, how are MNOs potentially going to work together, even the point you raised earlier, that it's not only about mobile, but even on the fiber side, potentially on the Wi-Fi side. So it's actually looking at this at a holistic way so that where we are in the journey of neutral host globally, because we're so early, it's just about really getting people to be able to talk the same language, compare, contrast, and understand and find the right solutions so that we can drive that forward. And that's important for TIP to lead because it's a vacuum that's out there right now.
That's really good, because I remember when I started doing this, and I ran workshops about 5-6 years ago on neutral host, and a good chunk of that was about, well, what is a neutral host? And here's this 5 different definitions. I mean, do you have now like an ontology or a description of all the different approaches?
So just last week, we've released 4 white papers from the project group. The first is a foundational framework defining what are the 7 characteristics of a neutral host, what is the axis on for each of those 7 parameters to be evaluated, and how do you actually align everyone so that if there is a venue owner in France or there's a sports arena in the US, they can basically refer to this and understand what is the type of solution that they're looking for. And to help that, we've also started doing industry vertical papers. So there was one released on hospitality, one on sports venues, and we're also partnering with the CTA for cities and try to help cities to think about how they can do smart cities as well. So it's exactly trying to establish that ontology.
Excellent, thank you. So I'm going to now go to the whole panel and ask about what business models are working. I mean, really, it comes down to who pays for neutral host. Is it the venue that we've heard of? Is it city? Is it the operators? Is it another group of stakeholders, private equity funds that are looking for a long-term investment? Where's the money coming from, and is it the same around the world? So, anyone want to take that first? I'm going to point to Mikael, actually.
I think there's a very clear one with the venue owner pays. But then, of course, there are different venues. If you take airports, I think they might have a different view from time to time. Stadiums might have a different view. But in general, I would say the main interest, as soon as you go indoor, actually starts to become much more the venue owner. They have more invested capital in that. They have more revenue per whatever type of metric you do. So I think their interest to secure a good indoor coverage is very much on their side. But of course, it's also a benefit for the operators because they also provide a better customer experience. And it might be a gray scale from time to time, but I think 95% or more of the buildings is from the venue owners.
Kunal, I know when I saw you present last year, you were talking about part of the benefit to the operators being in neighbouring cells. So do the operators pay for this, or is it the railway stations or others? What are you seeing?
Yes, so on the railways, we are actually asking the MNOs to pay. And the reason is exactly what you mentioned. We're carrying today about 8 terabytes of traffic per day for both the operators combined across these 9 stations. So that's a massive revenue uplift, and it's also freed up the surrounding sites. The overall traffic capacity of the entire microgeography has gone up by about 65%. So that's 65% more revenue that they didn't have a year and a half ago.
Interesting. Brendan?
Everybody pays. I think that's the only way it works, and I think that's the real sort of change in the last few years. The MNOs have traditionally always paid, but if you look at the revenues and if you look at the EBITDA of the MNOs, they can't continue to do that. And actually, the evolution of shared networks isn't just that it's MNO coverage; it's private networks for the venue owner. It's maybe whether that's Wi-Fi or 5G actually to the venue owner, they don't really care. So actually having conversations about what are the outcomes helps drive who pays, and more often than not, there's an element of everybody paying because there's a benefit to so many more people.
I mean, presumably it must depend on the type of building, and so if it's like a visitor-rich environment, like a convention centre, it's presumably different to, say, a factory where it's more employees plus some visitors.
Absolutely. I think, we're working with the Bolden networks of the world who have a different approach to the market, but we're also working with large enterprises who have either a single building site that they have lots of visitors and employees, and they want to improve the consumer experience, but they also want to be thinking bigger picture about their own transformation. And so we're seeing the models range from neutral host, and it's just a replacement for an aging DAS system, to neutral host plus a full, robust private network where they really want to drive transformational change. And then in the middle, we're seeing neutral host with a dormant core, whereby they're not quite ready to take that next step for the bigger change, but they see the need and they're planning for the future.
Thank you. And just for people here who are not sort of aficionados of indoor wireless, DAS is distributed antenna system. Probably a building like this will have a sort of indoor system, essentially a signal booster for multiple operators. Jennifer, though, Verizon's unusual in that you're an operator that's selling neutral host services, whether it's to venues or perhaps to other carriers to onboard. Are you also a buyer? So if there's a neutral host somewhere else, are you in the middle on this?
To be clear, Verizon wants to be the anchor tenant for all of our customers, for sure, of a neutral host system, because we believe in the opportunity to build out the longer-term transformational platform. But yes, we do evaluate based on our consumers and the experience that they're having. When we're invited to be part of someone else's neutral host, if it makes sense for our customers, we will step forward, absolutely.
Okay, that's a sort of an attitude I wish was more common across the telecoms industry. I mean, I have a conversation about things like network APIs, where everyone wants to be a seller and no one wants to be a buyer. So it's good to hear that you do actually now have some service providers on both sides of the market. How much commonality is there internationally? I mean, Kunal, for example, do you think that you can take your model that you're doing in India and run them in Europe or North America or somewhere else, or is there specifics about the Indian market that mean you have to think about that as an isolated example?
So I think when we talk about high-density venues, they're about the same all over the world, because there you're looking for operators to provide optimal customer experience because you're expecting very high visitor traffic and very high data and voice consumption. Where the model probably starts to change geography to geography is when you start getting into things like multi-tenant commercial complexes or residential, and then the balance of power or the balance of payment probably shifts. But what we're primarily focusing on, which is first railway stations, then eventually airports, hospitals, that's probably about the same the world over.
Thanks. Mika, I mean, I know you told me that you've expanded recently into a couple of other geographies. So are you seeing that it's copy and paste or very different everywhere you look?
I think it's very similar. So we are deploying in Norway, Denmark, UK, and Sweden. The attitude from the operators, especially the incumbent, might differ from country to country. And I think it's encouraging to see Verizon also stepping on to other neutral hosts. I think that's a good step forward, because at the end of the day, it actually increases the relevance for the operators, because you provide more indoor networks or outdoor networks on the licensed spectrum, which I think is good for operators. And the alternative would, of course, be just to deploy on Wi-Fi and maybe Starlink, and then you reduce the relevance for the operator. So I think there is a strategic battle today within a lot of the operators to actually think through how they should do. I don't think it's so complicated. Just look at the capex constraints you have and how can you create enough relevance. Then you have the answer.
Thanks. Brendan, I mean, again, Bolden has historically been in lots of different locations, primarily with things like transit and metropolitan authorities. Is it more that you're seeing difference across countries or between classes of deployment? So, a transit network versus an industrial site or something like that?
Yeah, I think mainly it's what you're deploying and where the real difference is. If you look at some of our deployments in New York and London, they're very similar, what we're deploying for Transport for London in London or MTA in New York. You know, but then if you look at what we're doing around higher education in the US, we're doing sort of Wi-Fi networks for campuses, you know, colleges, etc. in the US, and that's because it's a specific need. And I actually think it's the need that drives the type of deployment, and then actually you can add flavors of it afterwards. So Wi-Fi can turn into neutral host, can turn into private network, you know, and equally a DAS, a traditional DAS, can turn into a private network afterwards. So I think it's really that nuance that's the key difference.
So I mean, what are the obstacles to this? What are the challenges? Yeah, is it awareness? Is it collaboration between multiple operators on the same infrastructure? Is it regulatory or policy or something like that? Yeah, what's Jennifer? What's keeping you awake on this?
I think it's been mentioned. You know, the adoption is a mental shift for a lot of different kinds of players, right? The shift from the MNOs providing the service to actually buying and thinking about how to manage that and orchestrate it themselves. So I think that shift has been a real unlock for us because it is changing the value proposition.
I mean, you must have some interesting conversations with the other US operators for, well, this is Verizon being neutral rather than Verizon as a competitor. Do you manage to sort of keep that distance?
Verizon is still a competitor, to be clear. We want to win the business of the neutral host. We will compete against the other carriers and the Boldens of the world, absolutely. But we also do it knowing that the proprietor of the system will then be bringing in the additional carriers.
So they will bring them in rather than your salespeople going to AT&T and saying, hey, do you want to be on this location at Cummins factory or something?
That's correct.
Right, okay. Kunal, what are your challenges that you're seeing for getting wider adoption?
So it's an evolution of the market, right? In the sense that because we have such low ARPUs, so everything becomes that much more price sensitive. So it's not necessarily about, you know, how do you create absolutely the best system in isolation of the economics. So essentially you're talking about, yes, we've proven RAN sharing, we've proven we can deliver high density, but can we continue to get scale so that the economics continue to get favorable, and then it sort of gets over that tipping point where it becomes the default solution and no one is asking the business case anymore. I think that's where we are in our journey.
And you mentioned scale there. I mean, roughly how many sites are you in at the moment, if you're talking about the sort of building-related ones?
Sure. So we're at about, I mean, we're at 9 railway stations, but in those 9 railway stations, we're doing about 150 sectors of traffic across, you know, multiple bands of 4G only right now. We're getting ready to launch 5G, and that'll add capacity. But yeah, in India, numbers are very large, right? Mumbai alone has, for each of the operators, about 8,000 sites. So, yeah, we've got 9. So there's a big difference.
If I could add to that, you know, I think it's easy to count deployments and to think about, oh, well, there's a deployment, there's a deployment. But to your point, not all deployments are created equal, right? You could have a campus with 55 buildings. You could have a single location, right? So as we're thinking about, it's only 9, but the complexity of those 9 is incredible.
Mikhail, I mean, what's challenging for you? Is it scale? Is it expansion? Is it onboarding operators? Is it educating property companies?
Yeah, of course, there are different type of thresholds. Education of the customer is very important. We invest quite a bit of that with different type of events and very niche towards the property segment. Onboarding operators is different in every country. It is a journey. It's not to be you know, ignored. Then I think also the maybe most important thing is the overall adoption of 5G services in the society. So it would be fantastic to see even more deployments of, you know, good laptop subscriptions for 5G and so on. So I think there is the ecosystem as such is not very mature. I think neutral host is a good element in there because we can come and sell to property owners. We can do the things which is difficult for an operator to do, which is to coordinate the rest of the operators. And we can do that without competing with anyone. So you can never buy a Protiviti SIM, but we can enable the SIMs to be, so to say, provisioned in the building.
Is it possible as well, with things like 5G, there's connectivity, but at least in theory, there's all these additional features in the various 5G standards. So I've been writing this week about, you know, red cap for IoT and various things to do with, you know, ultra low latency and time sensitive, this, that, and the other. Or is this really
all supported? All is supported. You can do carrier aggregation between indoor and outdoor and so on. So we support all of that.
Brendan, same thing?
Well, actually, I think it's more based than that. There's a real sort of barrier for success in shared networks of any type, and that's trust. And I think that ultimately you have to win over the trust of whether it's the venue owner, the operator, the municipality, and it's trust to do what you said you would do, which is deliver the connectivity, but to be open. I think the real challenge with neutral host is, you know, are you going to deliver it so that everybody can join, everybody can prosper? And I think that trust element is something that shared networks have struggled with in the last few years, and it's ultimately, you know, what was our sort of mantra is we work with everybody, you know, and we want to enable successful connectivity for all, but that comes from trust.
Well, you mentioned municipalities, so I'm going to use that as a tenuous link to government and policy and regulation. Is this an area that you're quite happy for governments to sort of more or less distance themselves from, or are there things that would be helpful if various agencies said, you know, are you a building owner? Do you have lousy coverage? You know, here's our recommended solution. Go and look up, you know, look up neutral host. I mean, or from a regulatory point of view, shared spectrum or something like that. Is government a help or a hindrance, and how would you like that to change?
I think government intervention is a good thing when it's done with the right intention. And I think sometimes, you know, if I take an example in the UK, some of the awards that have been made around trials, they're great. They want the right outcome, but sometimes it's very hard to get there within the realms of that trial or that piece of work. So I think sometimes it's good. I think spectrum is an obvious thing as we get into the evolution of sharing, active sharing. You know, how does that work from a spectrum point of view? So I think it's positive, but it has to be positive the whole way through, not just the intent, but the execution of that intent.
Jennifer, I mean, are you, obviously you just have got a change of government, but have you seen anything from, you know, FCC or NTIA or others that they're even aware of neutral host and that they're interested in it? And are you happy with where it is at the moment, or is that something you don't want to answer right now?
I actually would flip the question. You know, you're asking from the regulator's point of view, could they be doing more to support neutral host? As I think about the US network and how we engage with the regulators for our macro network, it's extensive. It's you know, a lot of hoops that we jump through that aren't necessarily understood by the enterprise space. And so the question for me is about how do you educate the buyers of a neutral host network that, you know, the foundational aspects are secure and strong based on the current regulatory environment, at least in the US.
Great, thank you. Mikael, anything you've seen in Nordics?
No, I think it's quite similar from many perspectives in terms of technology. We can use the same platform, use the same terminals, everything. I think what we start to see more and more is, of course, that the initial wave of 5G deployments is coming to an end. And now you start to realize, especially what we see, the indoor coverage challenges, and then a starting demand of private network in the enterprise segment. I think that's probably common in US as well.
Education.
Yeah. Right, we've got about 30 seconds left, so I'm just going to very quickly ask the panel, what would you like to see next from the ecosystem and the TIP project group on neutral host? What's, you know, is it more about business models? What's next? Kunal, go for it. I'll start.
Go for it. So I think, you know, as we're establishing definitions and business models, the next big thing we want to be working on is creating a reference document for who are all the participants in the ecosystem globally. And that's going to probably be our next big undertaking. Get everyone there to say, this is what we do, this is where we are, these are our strengths, so that new venue owners, new participants can go find people whom to work with.
Thank you. Jennifer.
I like to play off the ecosystem word because I think the ecosystem is critical in any operating environment, but that trust that Brendan referenced is going to be a key part of advancing the ecosystem.
Brendan?
Just focus on outcomes. Just keep focusing on outcomes and everything else will be okay.
Mikael, last word.
I think it's being said. I mean, build the ecosystem, focus to get things done. And I think for the operators in general, be a little bit more open to try new things, and maybe speed is nice from time to time as well.
Excellent. Well, I'd like you to all join with me in thanking the panel. It's been a really good discussion. And there's also a breakout session going for a much deeper dive on different aspects of neutral host later on this afternoon. I think it's in Wicklow 1, but don't hold me to it. Anyway, thank you very much.
right, everybody, that's the end of our main stage presentations this morning. You can head on downstairs to the expo hall for lunch, and there'll be more sessions on the acceleration stage throughout the day. So thank you so much for joining us this morning. Thank you to all our speakers and our partners. Have a great afternoon.